Chapter 487. Hey hey hey. Why are you guys looking at me like that? Is it weird that I know? Gudatsi looked at Roman, Sharon, Matthew, and even Wu Ming's doubtful and surprised eyes. Ahahaha. After all, Tachika, you're not that smart. Roman, on the other hand, laughed out loud. Then, she was shut up by Gudatsi's resentful glare. In fact, there are a lot of things that Roman said are not quite right, but that's generally the case, and this spiritual base is indeed related to Maeve. When Roman talked about the Celtic forces in the easternmost region, Wu Ming also guessed what Roman wanted to say. After all, this group of servants must have collected a lot of information over the past few days. Yesterday, when Rome and Greece were fighting, a Celtic servant broke into the battlefield. I think you guys also know about it. After Wu Ming finished, Sharon nodded and replied. Master and Mashu were brought back from the edge of the battle by Geronimo, who was collecting information. And in the end, even here, we saw a big explosion. It's the explosion that's comparable to a nuclear bomb. Fortunately, Matthew and I ran fast. If we were affected, we would really be finished. Gudatsi had a happy expression, and Matthew was also relieved. Although he was very strong, in the face of such a big explosion, even he didn't have the confidence to resist it with his noble phantasm. We have a partner who was injured by the big explosion, and he is still in a coma. But Karen's sentence attracted Wu Ming's attention. Could it be Rama? Hey! How do you know? Roman shouted in an instant. Seeing Roman's reaction, Wu Ming laughed. How could he not know? How could he not know about the explosion that he created? Not to mention himself, even Caesar and Cleopatra, who were very close to the explosion, probably wouldn't have fainted. As a servant's own defense, coupled with the hurricane caused by the big explosion, they probably wouldn't have fainted even if they were injured. As for further outside, even if there were other servants, they wouldn't have fainted. Only Roman, who was the closest to the big explosion and had overdrawn his spiritual base to use his noble phantasm, would have fainted. Therefore, Wu Ming immediately knew who the unconscious servant was. That being said, Rama wasn't an ordinary person. He had overdrawn his spiritual base to continuously use his noble phantasm, plus he was affected by his own super noble phantasm, but he was only fainted. He was worthy of his opponent in another world. And Sharon guessed something. He looked at Wu Ming in shock. Are you the servant who caused that explosion? Wu Ming only nodded his head in response. What? So, the white light was released by you, assassin? Gudatsi was also surprised. She missed the opportunity to meet Wu Ming for nothing. Then, Wu Ming told everyone about himself. He was summoned by Maeve to the battlefield between Greece and Rome, killed Caligula, defeated Hercules, rescued Argo and destroyed it. Then, Rama angrily chased after him and attacked him. His noble phantasm collided with Rama's noble phantasm. As there was too much mana, it directly caused a nuclear explosion. Then, he went back to rest for a day and came here. After listening to Wu Ming's explanation, everyone nodded in retrospect. That Rome's berserker is Caligula, the third emperor of Rome and the uncle of the tyrant Nero. Speaking of which, assassin, you were able to kill that berserker so easily. That's pretty amazing, Gudatsi said excitedly. Hearing this, Wu Ming thought, could it be that Gudatsi and Matthew were teleported to the battlefield? How unlucky they were. By the way, Tachika, were you teleported to the center of the battlefield? Wu Ming didn't ask, but he still wanted it. Once he asked, Gudazi's face instantly drooped. Assassin, you don't know. At that time, it was all the doctor's fault. We said that we would be teleported to a safe place, but we were directly teleported to the center of the battlefield. Matthew and I almost died. Fortunately, you led Hercules and Caligula away. Roman, who was being complained about, also had a bitter expression. I didn't have a choice. The magic power of this singularity suddenly changed before you guys entered. The concentration increased by more than a little, almost comparable to the god's generation. Because of this, the teleportation location was wrong. When Roman said this, Wu Ming nodded. After all, the Magic King created 4 holy grails, and the concentration of magic power increased as well. This was also why Wu Ming felt that the air was fresh. However, too high a concentration of magic power could be considered a poison to a modern person like Gudatsi. Fortunately, it hadn't reached that level yet. That's it? Then I've wronged you, Doctor. Gudatsi apologized to Roman. Actually, this is also my fault. You must know that justice depends on you. If something happened to you, I would be a sinner. Fortunately, you're fine now. At this time, Sharon, who was distracted just now, came back to his senses. After knowing that Hercules was fine, he was also relieved. After all, Hercules was Charon's disciple, so it was inevitable that he would be worried. Then, Cylinder, are you our enemy? Sharon said seriously. Mashu and Roman were stunned for a moment, but they quickly reacted. I don't think so. Roman smiled awkwardly. If he was really an enemy, then they had invited a wolf into the house. How can I be an enemy? Since Assassin said that she would help us in the control room, then she must be a partner. Looking at his senior's determined eyes and hearing his senior's indifferent tone, Matthew was stunned for a moment before he spoke. Yes, I believe in Senior, and I also believe in Senior Cylinder. Sharon smiled when he saw this. Of course, I believe in Cylinder's character. Otherwise, I wouldn't have allowed you to bring him here. After all, Sharon had a good impression of Wu Ming since he had the memory of the 14 Horsemen battle. But I still have to ask. After that, Sharon looked at Wu Ming again. Wu Ming naturally shook his head. I am indeed not an enemy. To be honest, the Celtic forces are no longer an enemy to you because the person in charge of the Celtic forces is now me. The place fell into silence. Then, Sharon covered his ears. Hey, hey, hey. The sound penetrated the house and attracted other servants. Sharon removed his hands that were covering his ears and went out to send away the servants that were attracted by the sound of the scream. As expected of a teacher, he had already expected this scream and covered his ears in advance. So, why are you so surprised? Even though Wu Ming was a servant, facing the girl's scream, Roman automatically ignored it. He still couldn't stand it. But one of the 4 bosses that we need to defeat suddenly became one of our own. It's a bit hard to react. Gudotsi smiled awkwardly. 4 bosses? Wu Ming was puzzled by Gudotsi's words. Chapter 488. According to Master Sharon and Geronimo's information, we know that there are 4 forces that have the Holy Grail, and the way to restore this singularity is to retrieve the 4 Holy Grails. So, we need to defeat the 4 big bosses. Gudotsi said with a smile while looking at Wu Ming. Although it's not wrong to say that, it feels like we're playing a game. Tachika, be serious. Roman said weakly. Hearing Roman's complaint, Matthew felt quite embarrassed, but it was good that his senior could be so cheerful. Forget it, lass. All you need to know is that the Celtic side that I represent is already one of us. Although I can't say that I'm supporting you, I definitely won't hinder you, Wu Ming replied with a smile as he patted Gudotsi's head hard. All right. Can't say that I'm supporting you? This made everyone puzzled. After all, Wu Ming was the leader of the Celtic side. How could he not support them? Wu Ming just explained with a wry smile. After all, it's not that easy to command the Celtic servants, unless you use the Holy Grail to forcibly control them. But if that's the case, it's better not to control them. Wu Ming knew that forcibly picked melons would not be sweet, so for Finn and the others, if they were not willing, Wu Ming was not prepared to forcibly control them with the Holy Grail. That's right, just not being enemies with us is already a big help. Roman sighed with relief. The Celtic forces were not as difficult to deal with as Greece and Rome. However, as long as Assassin is here, she can be considered a force, Gudotsi said playfully. Roman and Matthew were stunned, but after thinking about it carefully, they realized that it was true. Just like the previous nuclear explosion, except for those first-class servants, no, it should be the top servants who could withstand it. Like Achilles, in theory, he had an immortal body, but if he was in that big explosion, he would probably die. After all, he wouldn't be able to protect his heel from that kind of explosion. However, speaking of helpers, I can find you some. Wu Ming thought of Athena and the other subordinate gods. Actually, we already have a lot of servants on our side, so there's no need to deliberately look for more helpers. Right now, it's better to retrieve the Holy Grail as soon as possible. Roman was right. If they deliberately looked for helpers, it would have some impact on their next plan. Taking advantage of the situation was fine, but there was no need to do it deliberately. Wu Ming also nodded. That's true. It is indeed troublesome to summon them. The Sky Wings relied on the clones of Wu Ming's 12 clones to form a connection with Wu Ming, But Celander's spirit base did not have such an ability, so it could only rely on its subordinate gods. Although the subordinate gods also relied on their own ability to summon them, Wuming could also draw a magic circle to summon the clones of Athena, Lancelot, and the others from the world of the godslayers. However, it would also take some effort. Thinking about it this way was putting the cart before the horse. Then forget it. Actually, Tachika is right. With me around, this trip will definitely be easy. Wuming nodded and patted Gudatzi's little head, causing Gudatzi to giggle and nudge Wuming's hand. It was not that Wuming was arrogant, but Wuming, who had cheated, could retrieve all 4 holy grails in a week if he wanted to. Of course, the premise was that the Magic King did not cheat. After all, it was a gift from that guy. Wuming did not think that it was as simple as having a few more servants. In addition, there was also Gudatzi, so Wuming chose to proceed step by step. I was originally going to go through this place to the American forces in the west of the Rocky Mountains to prepare for an alliance. Who would have thought that I would inadvertently spy on Tachika? When Wuming said this, Matthew and Roman also sighed. Gudatzi, on the other hand, looked very happy. This means that I am fated to be with Assassin, he. Looking at Gudatzi, who was looking at him with a smile, Wuming also smiled. You said that you are going to the west of the Rocky Mountains. Are you going to unite with Edison? At this time, Sharon, who had sent away the other servants, also came back and happened to hear Wuming's words just now. Yes, after all, only the American forces that originally confronted the Celts did not hold the Holy Grail, so I decided to try to unite with the Lion Head, but... Then, Wuming paused and continued. I don't know about the Edison you are talking about. I just heard from Maeve that the current ruler of the American forces is a Lion Head. Lion Head? Everyone was also stunned. Could it be that Edison is a Lion Head? What's going on? I also learned about Edison from Geronimo. According to the information collected by Robin Hood from the residents, their current president is indeed called Edison. Sharon looked at Wuming and said. Wuming also knew that Sharon must not be lying, so he nodded. And coincidentally, we are also going to unite with Edison. After all, the other party does not have the Holy Grail, so he is indeed a good ally. Sharon continued to talk to Wuming. And Wuming was also happy after hearing this. In that case, let's go together. Sharon also nodded. I also have the same idea. I am going to only let Master and Matthew go with you. This way, the others can also free up some time. After all, we still have 3 opponents to deal with. Sharon sighed and continued. Although we have a large number of followers, except for Achilles, the other followers have a very low chance of winning against the Greek and Roman servants. As for me, in front of Hercules and the others, I can only follow the rules. We are also relieved to have your help. Wuming also understood Karen's words. The followers that Wuming saw just now, in terms of real strength, only Achilles, Sharon, and Pamilia could enter Wuming's eyes. The others did not bring the slightest sense of threat to him. For example, although Spartacus' noble phantasm was powerful, it was purely self-destructing. Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Geronimo, and the rest were only able to search for enemies. The intelligence they gathered was very reliable, but their combat power was still too weak for their current opponents. As for Lisbeth and Kyoheim, who was just dragged away with her mouth covered, felt like a problem child, and Lisbeth, it seemed that the other followers were afraid of her. Could it be that she was actually very strong? Oh right, they still had Rama, who was seriously injured and unconscious. If Rama wasn't injured, he would also be a reliable expert. But now, he had become a burden. This was really a case of a tiger being bullied by dogs. Just when Wuming was thinking, Gudatzi smiled happily. Good, with Assassin, the journey will be much safer. It was not that Sharon and the others were not helpful, it was just Gudatzi's temporary feeling. Gudatzi did not have any negative emotions, so Sharon was not angry. In that case, you will be on the road tomorrow morning. Sharon proposed. Whether it was Roman, Matthew, or Gudatzi, they had no objection to Karen's proposal. By the way, Rama has not woken up yet. I will go and see him. Wuming suddenly said. Chapter 489. Assassin, do you know how to heal as well? Gudatzi said in surprise. I'll have to see it for myself, Sharon said with a smile. Both Mashu and Roman also showed their interest. Roman's words were only because he was the head of the medical department, and Mashu's words were because she had always been interested in the heroes who left their names in history, especially the one who changed from assassin to Sarand. After all, he had taught a medical expert who had created the elixir of immortality. In terms of treatment, he could not be regarded as a grandmaster, but he could be regarded as a master. However, Wu Ming smiled bitterly and shook his head. I don't know how to heal, I only know some healing magic, but I have a way to cure Rama. After all, it could be said that Romo had become like that because of him. Now that he had another teammate, it wasn't that bad. It was much better than having another burden. But since you want to see it, then let's go together. Later, Wu Ming, Godotzi, Matthew, Sharon, and Roman came to a house in Riverton with lights on. Along the way, Sharon told Wu Ming that there were humans living in this town, and they were actually the outsiders. However, because of Geronimo, the residents also accepted Sharon and other servants. After all, they could at least protect them. As for why they would protect them, along the way, the lights in the surrounding houses were turned off. After all, this was a matter of course. When Wu Ming arrived, the moon had already risen high in the sky. Servants could not sleep, but Godotzi could not. It could be said that if it were not for Wu Ming's unexpected arrival, Godotzi would have fallen asleep long ago. However, Wu Ming's arrival was also an unexpected surprise for Godotzi. Sharon knocked on the door of the room, followed by the sound of trotting, and the door was opened. What are you doing? Don't you know that the wounded need to rest? The person who came was a woman dressed like a battlefield doctor. She had a pretty face, a red top that looked like a military uniform, a black pleated skirt, white pantyhose, and short boots that reached her calves. She looked like both a nurse and a soldier, giving people a strange feeling. This is Miss Nightingale. She has very special medical skills. Sharon awkwardly introduced her to Wu Ming. Not only Sharon, but even Godotzi, Mashu, and even Roman on the virtual screen had strange expressions on their faces. On the other hand, Wu Ming was baffled. She looked very normal. It's already night time. The wounded need to rest. You should leave quickly. I still have to prepare for the amputation, Nightingale said calmly. According to Wu Ming's knowledge, Rama seemed to be the only injured person here. In other words, this servant wanted to perform an amputation on Rama? Then, Wu Ming heard Godotzi and Matthew whispering behind him. Hey hey hey! Aren't their servants taking turns to guard Rama with Nightingale? What's going on? Senpai, have you forgotten? When Senpai Cylinder arrived, almost all the servants had left. Mr. Geronimo did not come back, and Senpai Karen was with us. Just now, Miss Elizabeth, Mr. Robin Hood, and Mr. Billy Boy joined forces to suppress Kyoheim. Usually they would take turns, but because of what happened just now, only Miss Nightingale is left here. Parmelia and Achilles naturally wouldn't watch Nightingale here to prevent her from doing anything to Rama. Fortunately, we came quickly. Listening to the constant whispering behind him, Wu Ming smiled awkwardly. He finally understood why everyone treated this angelic young lady with such special treatment. Miss Nightingale, hello, nice to meet you. My name is Cylinder. Anyway, let's say hello first. Hello, Mr. Cylinder. Do you need an amputation? Wu Ming was silent for a while. Why do you want an amputation so often? Are you that obsessed with amputation? If that's the case. Ahem. It's like this. Achilles needs to be amputated. He specially asked me to invite you over, Wu Ming said in an extremely serious tone. Is that so? I'll go over now. Help me take care of the wounded. Nightingale's eyes lit up, and she immediately returned to her room. A moment later, she walked out with 2 small green bags and walked toward Achilles' house. Anyway, the distance was not close, and it was enough for Wu Ming to treat Rama. Cylinder. You really? Sharon looked at Wu Ming with a dumbfounded expression. Wu Ming also coughed a few times awkwardly. However, Achilles, my good brother, please do me a favor. If Achilles heard Wu Ming's words, he would definitely use his chariot to attack Wu Ming. Matthew and Godotzi also fell into a reverie. The immortal body that was invulnerable to swords and spears needed an amputation,
and the image of Achilles' limbs that Nightingale could not cut off no matter how hard she tried appeared in their minds.
The direction, no matter what, Achilles will be fine. Let's go in and take a look at Rama. Wu Ming smiled, and then walked in. Sharon also knew his disciple's ability. Nightingale would not really amputate Achilles' limbs, so he stopped thinking about it and followed Wu Ming into the house. Gudatzi and Matthew saw that the two of them had entered, so they quickly followed. After all, the two of them were here to see how Wu Ming would treat Rama. As for Achilles? Ahem. Why would an immortal hero be afraid of a nurse? Let's not care about him for now. Just like that, Achilles was unknowingly bought by his teacher and master. After entering the house, Wu Ming followed the magical aura to Rama's room. At that moment, Rama did not seem to have any injuries on his body, but his face was full of sorrow. He was unconscious, and his mouth seemed to be mumbling something. Sido. My Sido. At that moment, Wu Ming could only smile bitterly. He did not hate such an infatuated person. Moreover, she was like this because of him. Therefore, he was even more certain that he should save Rama. Rama's spiritual base is quite unstable now. It could disappear at any time. You can say that Rama's firm belief saved him. If not for that, I'm afraid that Rama would have left when he was unconscious, Sharon said beside Wu Ming. Wu Ming nodded, and then looked at the unconscious Rama again. Indeed, Rama's belief was probably his wife, Sido. To put it simply, Rama is extremely lacking in magical power now. If he had enough magical power, he would be able to recover on his own without our help. At that moment, Roman, who had turned off the virtual screen for some reason, turned it on again and projected it in front of Wu Ming. Only magical power? Wu Ming was stunned when he heard that. That seemed to be right. Rama had to rush and release his noble artifact. He had to squeeze out his spiritual base because he did not have enough magical power. If he had enough magical power now, he might not be able to recover immediately, but at least he would not be on the verge of leaving. That's right. Because Rama is unconscious, Tachika can't sign a contract with him. However, even if she did sign a contract, Tachika probably doesn't have enough magical power, Roman said bitterly. Moreover, the other servants don't have much magical power to begin with. Therefore, even if I have a way to transfer magical power to Rama, the magical power gathered by all of us can only keep Rama alive. There's no way to save him at all. Sharon shook his head. Wu Ming secretly nodded in his heart. That was also true. If not for that, perhaps even if Rama was saved by Geronimo, he would have disappeared by now. However, since Rama is lacking magical power, then this treatment will be simple, Wu Ming smiled slightly. Simple. Several people were puzzled. However, Sharon realized something. I lack everything, but the one thing I don't lack is magical power. Chapter 490. After saying that, Wu Ming's body erupted with a huge wave of mana. Matthew and Gudatzi were directly pushed away, and Sharon had to struggle to maintain his body to not be pushed away. Roman's screen, on the other hand, disappeared due to the violent fluctuations of mana. Then, Wu Ming raised a hand in front of him, and countless amounts of mana in his body and the mana released outside of his body converged. Streaks of dark blue mana continuously converged. This was because the purity of the mana was so high that it could be seen with the naked eye, and this made Sharon tremble. Countless amounts of mana continuously condensed in Wu Ming's hand, and not long after, this mana formed a blue high-density mana crystal in the shape of a holy grail. With the appearance of this mana crystal, the wind in the room also disappeared. If not for the traces of chaos in the room and the fact that Gudatzi and Matthew were paralyzed on the ground from the wind, perhaps the wind just now would have been mistaken for an illusion. You recognize this thing, right? Wu Ming weighed the mana crystal in his hand and looked at Gudatzi and Matthew. The two of them stood up in a sorry state, patted their aching buttocks, and nodded. I've seen it before. Chaldea has many mana crystals, but why is yours blue? And it's much bigger than Chaldea's. Gudatzi indicated that her mana crystal was a green cube, and it was in small pieces. There's more to be surprised about next. Wu Ming smiled, and then released his mana again. But this time, the mana released only filled Wu Ming's hand, so Gudatzi did not need to worry about being blown away again. The three of them just watched Wu Ming continue. Pure mana that was visible to the naked eye appeared in Wu Ming's hand. The dark blue mana climbed onto the blue Holy Grail crystal, and as if it was dyed, the Holy Grail crystal began to change color. Surprisingly, when the dark blue color covered the blue mana crystal, it didn't dye it a deeper blue, but a golden color. While he was at it, Wu-Ming also smoothed out the edges and corners of the Holy Grail's crystal with magic. Just like that, a Holy Grail appeared before Gudatzi. The Holy Grail? Roman shouted in shock as the virtual screen reappeared. That's not it, Doctor. That's a mana crystal created by Assassin. It's just that it's been dyed with some color. After hearing Gudatzi's explanation, Roman calmed down and used the equipment to analyze the Holy Grail. In the end, just as Gudatzi had said, this Holy Grail was just a magic crystal. However, this was enough for Roman to look at Wu-Ming in a different light, because this Holy Grail was indeed an incomplete Holy Grail. After Roman's examination, the Holy Grail held by Wu-Ming also had an unimaginably large amount of mana. It was almost the same as the real Holy Grail. It could be said that the Holy Grail held by Wu-Ming only had the characteristic of having a large amount of mana. Apart from that, this Holy Grail didn't have the ability of the real Holy Grail. However, just this alone was enough to surprise Roman. Just now, due to the influence of the magical fluctuations and the poor signal, the connection between Roman and Gudatzi was directly cut off. However, because Wu-Ming's speed of condensing the mana crystal wasn't slow, it only took a few minutes for Roman to reconnect. In other words, Wu-Ming created an incomplete version of the Holy Grail in just a few minutes. I'm afraid you're the only one who can do such a shocking thing in just a few minutes.
Roman had a strange expression on his face as he said embarrassedly.
Roman was naturally referring to Wu-Ming's identity, and Wu-Ming also understood what Roman meant. Then, looking at Gudatzi, who was staring at the Holy Grail in his hand, Wu-Ming smiled. Then, Wu-Ming threw the Holy Grail in his hand to Gudatzi. Under Matthew's worried gaze, Gudatzi caught the Holy Grail in a panic. There's no hurry to use this on Romo now. You and Matthew can take a look at it. Then the two little girls, Matthew and Gudatzi, went to the side with the Holy Grail in their hands. They were still very interested in the item that was basically the same as the Holy Grail. After all, every time they retrieved the Holy Grail, they would be directly teleported back to Chaldea, so they were also quite curious. After seeing the two little girls go to the side, Wu-Ming looked at Sharon. When Nurse Nightingale returns, I'll let her use this Holy Grail bit by bit on Romo. As for bit by bit, after all, Romo's body was on the verge of collapse. If too much magic was injected at once, perhaps it would directly shatter. It was like a glass that had been soaked in boiling water for a long time. After taking it out, a large amount of cold water was poured into it. There was no doubt that the glass would explode. Sharon nodded. As a sage, Sharon naturally understood Romo's current situation. It was like a glass soaked in boiling water. Since it settled, then to Chica and Matthew, you two should go and rest first. It's getting late, and we still have to hurry tomorrow. Gudatzi was an ordinary person, so sleep was very important. Although Matthew was a subservient, he still had human habits. But even if he didn't sleep, Matthew wouldn't be able to last more than a few days. Then, Wu-Ming looked at Gudatzi and Matthew, who were constantly touching the Holy Grail. Hearing someone call him, Matthew's face turned red, and he quickly took his hand away from the Holy Grail. Gudatzi smiled and returned the Holy Grail to Wu-Ming. If that's the case, I also want to close the channel. Good night, everyone. Roman smiled and said good night, and closed the virtual screen. After Wu-Ming gave the Holy Grail to Sharon, he left with the two little girls. Remember where you live, I won't send you off. After all, Wu-Ming didn't know the way, so he didn't want to send them off. Hey, don't. Assassin. Matthew and I miss you. Come with us. Gudatzi instantly pulled Wu-Ming's arm and acted like a spoiled child when Matthew's face turned red. Wu-Ming smiled helplessly and nodded. Well, I have nothing to do now anyway. On the way to Gudatzi and Matthew's residence, Gudatzi kept chatting with Wu-Ming. From time to time, she would act like a spoiled little sister to Wu-Ming. This made Matthew, who was behind them, blushed. After all, this town wasn't that big. Even if Gudatzi deliberately slowed down, they arrived after chatting for a while. All right, hurry up and sleep. Otherwise, I won't bring you along tomorrow. Wu Ming patted Gudazi's little head dotingly. Matthew 2. Don't delay your sleep because you care too much about your seniors. Even if you're a subservient, you're still a human. Sleep well.
Matthew nodded with a red face.
Aha. Good night, assassin.
Then, Matthew and I will go in first.
After Matthew bowed to Wu Ming, he followed Gudazi into the room. Wu Ming, who stood outside the door, didn't leave immediately. Instead, he was thinking about something. Why do I feel that Tachika is getting more and more intimate? She's just like my little sister. Wu Ming thought about this problem and turned around to leave. In the room, Gudazi was humming happily as he made the bed for the two of them. Because there weren't many rooms, she and Matthew basically slept in the same bed. After all, Gudazi couldn't let her little sister sleep on the ground. By the way, Senior is very close to Senior Cylinder. It's just like a brother. Matthew, who was standing behind Gudazi, said gently. Oh, really? I don't feel anything. I just want to do that. Gudazi was stunned and smiled slightly. Then, her smile became mischievous. Could it be that Matthew is jealous? Gudazi looked at Matthew with sneaky eyes. How could it be? Matthew instantly panicked. But after seeing the look in his senior's eyes, he understood that his senior was teasing him. In an instant, Matthew's little face bulged like a bun.
He pretended to be angry and looked at Gudazi.
Aha.
Senior. Haha.
Okay, let's sleep. We still have to hurry tomorrow.
Senior is so annoying.
Chapter 491. The night went by silently. Early the next morning, Wu Ming knocked on Gudazi's door.
The one who opened the door was naturally Matthew, who had the physique of a servant.
Gudazi hadn't woken up yet, and when she saw Wu Ming, she kept yawning. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. At this moment, at the west entrance of the town, Wu Ming, Gudazi, and Matthew stood on one side, and other servants stood on the other side. Many of Riverton's residents were hiding in the distance, watching from afar. Even if the residents allowed these servants to live here, no matter how kind these servants were, they were not human, and the gap between the two couldn't be closed. Asterisk cough cough. Asterisk returning to the main topic, everyone was naturally sending Wu Ming and the other two off. By the way, Pamelia was still sleeping, after all, she was a vampire. Nightingale and Achilles, on the other hand, did not come for some unknown reason. On the contrary, Rama had already woken up and participated in the farewell ceremony. Early in the morning, Wu Ming would take Gudazi and Matthew to the west coast of the American continent to unite with Edison. Although it was a bit uncomfortable to give Chaldea's master to a servant who was originally an enemy, since it was Gudazi's decision, they naturally agreed. Of course, some people were happy, some people were sad, some people agreed, and some people opposed. Kyoheim bit her sleeve, looked at Gudazi with tears in her eyes, and then looked at Wu Ming angrily. She kept looking back and forth. That's enough, it's not a life and death parting. Robin Hood, who was standing on the side, sighed and shook his head helplessly. Billy Boy, who was standing next to Robin Hood, also nodded. Then, Elizabeth, who was in her costume, smiled. That's Little Dear's happiness. You'd better send her your blessings. Little Dear was Elizabeth's pet name for Gudazi. Listening to her enemy's words, Kyoheim was even angrier.
Damn stinky lizard, if it weren't for you, Anjin-sama would not fall into the hands of that man.
Anjin-sama was Kyoheim's nickname for Gudazi. At that moment, Kyoheim vented her anger on Elizabeth. Look at how happy Xiaolu is now. It's none of your business. Elizabeth naturally refused to be outdone and stared at Kyoheim. Looks like I have to teach you a lesson in order to win back Lady and Jun's love. Who's afraid of who? When Robin Hood and Billy Boy saw the two girls with dragon attributes staring at each other, they tactfully retreated and kept their mouths shut. On the other side. Do you really not need us to send another servant to protect Tachika-sama? Geronimo was still a little worried. This morning Geronimo, who went out to inquire about information, had returned, and naturally participated in the farewell ceremony. Oh, I really don't need it. Assassin is very strong. Gudazi held Wu Ming's arm and said with a smile. Believe in Cylinder, Geronimo. Karen's gentle voice came from the side.
After all, as soon as Geronimo returned, he learned that the master of his contract would go to Edison with a servant of the Celtic side who had just formed an alliance.
This really shocked him. Geronimo looked at Sharon, then looked at Godotzi and nodded.
I'll leave the master to you, Mr. Cylinder.
Don't worry, even if the enemy steps over my dead body, they won't be able to hurt Tachika. Not to mention, the enemy can't step over my dead body. Wu Ming said to Geronimo and Sharon. And the guarantee of Wu Ming, who created a nuclear explosion, was naturally enough to convince them. At this time Sharon also spoke. By the way, Cylinder, Nightingale didn't come back last night. I have ways to treat patients, so I used the Holy Grail on Rama, and the effect was not bad. This made Wu Ming stunned for a moment. Nightingale didn't go back, and she disappeared this morning. Achilles also disappeared today. Could it be that Nightingale chased after Achilles to do an amputation, and the two of them chased each other away? As if he saw Wu Ming's doubts, Sharon smiled bitterly. My disciple is indeed missing. I think it might be related to Ms. Nightingale. Sharon purposely went to look for his disciple this morning, and found that his disciple's house was in a mess. The windows were open, as if he was being chased by something. Thinking about it carefully, it might be that Nightingale. After all, she was a berserker. How could a berserker be easy to deal with? Compared to other classes, even an easy berserker was a problem child. This made Wu Ming feel awkward. Achilles, you are a man after all. How can you let a woman chase after you and run away? Cough cough. But it was Wu Ming's fault after all, so it was better not to talk about it. Then, Wu Ming looked at Rama. Although Rama was already awake, he could still see that he was weak. To use a phrase to describe him, he was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. But it had to be said that Karen's medical skills were superb. But then again, now that all the tools were prepared, Sharon alone was enough to treat Rama. However, to be able to wake Rama up in one night, Wu Ming took another look at Sharon. To be able to teach a disciple who created the elixir of immortality, Karen's reputation as a sage was not to be underestimated. This was because Wu Ming felt that Rama would need at least a few days to wake up after experiencing the magic of the Holy Grail. Just as Wu Ming was pondering, Rama saw that Wu Ming did not speak. After hesitating for a while, he pulled a long face and spoke first. I'm here to thank you. I was reckless when we first met. Thank you for saving my life. Rama was obviously talking about the incident where he threw the relic without hesitation. Although Wu Ming and Carl were on the same side, Wu Ming had just been summoned after all. The kidnapping of Sido probably had nothing to do with Wu Ming. Rama understood this as well. However, as he was too emotional at that time, he ended up harming himself. After all, they are now my subordinates in name. But don't worry, I won't do anything to your Sido anymore. On the contrary, I'll help you to save your Sido. Again, Wu Ming had a good impression of the infatuated man. If possible, Wu Ming did not mind helping him. You're right. They are also your subordinates. When I save Sido, I'll definitely have a good fight with you. As expected of a king, he was still quite cool when he calmed down. All right. I'll be waiting for you. Wu Ming smiled as he extended his hand. Rama was stunned when he saw that. He immediately reacted and extended his hand as well to shake Xian's hand. Godotzi smiled when she saw that. Both of them seemed to have buried the hatchet. After all, she liked to see them getting along well. If that's the case, there's nothing else. Let's go. Just like that, Wu Ming led Matthew, who was fully armed, and Godotzi, who kept waving at everyone as they headed west. Of course, Wu Ming and the rest did not need to walk 108,000 miles, nor did they need to face extreme difficulties. However, I feel like we've overlooked something. Wu Ming muttered to himself. In the forest near Riverton, Wu Ming's pseudo-heavenly lock had tied Spartacus up. He was still tied up and could not move at all. Oh, oppressor! Come and give me more pressure. Chapter 492. In the northwest of the Rocky Mountains, a 4 or 5 meter long white deer was jumping on the mountain like a spirit, running towards the west. This white deer was naturally the white deer that Wu Ming sat on before, the vehicle of the holy spear Yggdrasil. It was neither alive nor emotionless and was completely controlled by Wuming. After walking for a few minutes, Wuming thought that the speed was too slow and threw his spear to the ground. Then, the holy white deer based on Funbaba appeared in front of Gudatsi and Matthew. The appearance of the white deer made the two little girls feel good. After all, the white deer's appearance was still good enough. Then, Wuming, Gudatsi, and Matthew rode the white deer. Because of the increase in the number of people, the white deer that Wuming summoned was naturally a little bigger, making it more convenient for the three of them to ride. Wuming sat on the back of the white deer, holding Gudatsi in his arms, while Matthew sat behind Wuming and hugged Wuming tightly. Gudatsi closed her eyes and looked carefully. Her breathing was steady. There was no doubt that Gudatsi had fallen asleep. Wuming saw that Gudatsi was sleep-deprived, so he used hypnosis to make Gudatsi fall asleep. Of course, Gudatsi naturally didn't know that. She just felt very sleepy, so Wuming proposed that he could hold Gudatsi and Gudatsi gladly accepted. Wuming still used magic to make Gudatsi's senses change. Even in the violent vibration, Gudatsi felt stable, so the constant jumping of the white deer did not affect Gudatsi's sleep. On the other hand, Mashu was a little scared because of the speed of the white deer, so she hugged Wuming tightly. But after a period of adaptation, he got used to it. It was like riding a bus, watching the surrounding scenes receding, but he still hugged Wuming's waist tightly. Matthew's shield was hung on the white deer's tail by Wuming's control. The white deer's tail was like a ponytail. The snow-white long tail tied Matthew's shield, so there was no need to worry about the white deer's running and jumping. After all, the white deer's body was not much bigger, so it was not easy to put a shield on it. The speed of the people riding the white deer was a lot faster. In less than 2 hours, Wuming and the other two were about to leave the Rocky Mountains. In this way, we can be considered to have left the territory of the Japanese forces, Wuming said lightly. Along the way, Matthew told them about the Holy Grail forces in the Rocky Mountains. According to Matthew, there were no traces of humans in the entire Rocky Mountains. The whole mountain was full of ghosts. There were ghosts with green faces and fangs, and there were also ghosts without bodies. In short, no matter what kind of ghosts they were not something that the humans in the United States could deal with. The ghosts should be the soldiers of the Holy Grail forces. This was what Wuming said to himself when he first heard Matthew's explanation. Celtic had Wuming soldiers, Greece had Dragonfang soldiers, and Rome had Roman soldiers. Just like other forces, Japan also had its own ghost soldiers. The reason why the residents of Riverton allowed the servants to move in was because of the ghosts attacking the humans. The Celtic and Roman troops were not only soldiers, but they were also far away from here. However, the territories of Japan and Greece happened to be on both sides of Riverton. Moreover, ghosts and Dragonfang soldiers were really like wild beasts. Before the servants lived in Riverton, not only Riverton, but also the residents of the Missouri River Valley often suffered from sparse Dragonfang soldiers and ghosts. They only knew how to use guns, so how could they fight against these enhanced version of skeletons and ghosts? Naturally, they needed the help of the servants. Later, when Wuming asked who the leader of the ghosts was, Matthew shook his head. Matthew told Wuming that the one who went to explore the Rocky Mountains was Robin Hood. Because there was no one in the Rocky Mountains, only Robin Hood, who was known as the King of Faceless, had the ability to explore such a place. According to the exploration, Denver was determined to be the gathering place of the Holy Grail forces in Japan. However, he did not enter Denver because Robin Hood had sensed a large amount of poison before he even reached Denver. Robin Hood was also a master of poison, so he was very sensitive to poison. Under the premise of ensuring his own safety, Robin Hood collected some information and left. After that, everyone knew that the Japanese forces were not to be trifled with. At least, not many servants could ignore those poisons. Especially Sharon, who couldn't stand the Hydra's poison and chose to commit suicide. It was estimated that as long as Sharon approached, he would be poisoned to death. Even Kyoheim, who was originally a member of the Japanese forces, didn't know. When Kyoheim was summoned by the Holy Grail again, she didn't even pay attention to the leader of the Japanese forces and directly left the Rocky Mountains. Coincidentally, no one stopped Kyoheim, so she was released. In this way, Kyoheim, who pursued her love, betrayed her original side without any information. Perhaps, because of this reason, Kyoheim was a little more honest. However, in Kyoheim's words, all of this was for love,
for Kyoheim's Anjin-sama. In short, even Matthew didn't know the specific situation of the Japanese forces. However, Wu Ming had some idea in his mind. Japan, leader, ghost, poison. He could only think of Shitendaji. I don't know if Shitendaji here has the memory of burning Winterwood City. If so, it would be difficult to deal with. Wu Ming didn't know Shitendaji. Apart from the historical records, Wu Ming only knew that she was a female ghost who could eat people, drink wine, and didn't care about trifles. Yes, and the most important point, she did things completely according to her preferences. If she was persistent, she wouldn't let others feel comfortable even if she died. From the poisonous wine gourd in Winterwood City, it could be seen that Shitendaji, who used all her strength to release her noble phantasm, really disgusted Wu Ming. It really confirmed that sentence. Even if she died, she wouldn't feel at ease. It's better to leave here quickly. Thinking like this, Wu Ming controlled the white deer to speed up a little, wanting to leave this junction quickly. After Wu Ming and others left the Rocky Mountains, in the place where Wu Ming and others were just now, a purple and quite exposed figure appeared. He, what a delicious smell. After leaving the Rocky Mountains, Wu Ming was temporarily relieved. Fortunately, there was no Shitendaji who blocked the road to rob them. Then, Wu Ming and others entered a flat area that looked like a plain but was actually a plateau.
Chapter 493. In fact, the Cordillera was not the name of a mountain. Its full name was the Cordillera Mountains. To be precise, the Rocky Mountains were also part of the Cordillera Mountains, but in order to distinguish the territories of the Japanese forces and the American forces, the two were separated. The Japanese forces were like a stickler to the rules. They only occupied the eastern Rocky Mountains, the highest part of the Cordillera Mountains, and had no intention of expanding their forces. Otherwise, Maeve wouldn't be unable to find any information. After all, even the servants of Riverton, the neighbor of the Japanese forces, didn't clearly inquire about the Japanese forces. Apart from the Rocky Mountains, which were the tallest and largest, the Cordillera Mountains were left with the Central Plateau Basin and the Western Pacific Rim Mountains. At this moment, Wu Ming and the other two entered the Central Plateau Basin area. At this moment, Wu Ming temporarily stopped the white deer. If I remember correctly, following this river may be a place called Boise. Wu Ming thought and said to Matthew.
Gudatsi, on the other hand, was still sleeping. That, Senpai Cylinder, I am not very familiar with the terrain here. Matthew's face was slightly red and said slowly.
However, Senpai Cylinder was right. Matthew thought. It doesn't matter if you don't know, the point is that we may have to fight with the American forces. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes. Hey! So soon? Do we need to wake Senpai up? Matthew obviously didn't expect to contact the American forces so soon, so he asked Wu Ming if he should wake Gudatsi up. There's no rush now. There's still some distance before we reach Boise. Let her sleep for a while longer. Wu Ming caressed Gudatsi's hair lovingly. Looking at the sleeping face, Wu Ming felt like raising a daughter. Senpai Cylinder is really gentle to Senpai. Matthew didn't know if he was envious or gratified. Seeing Matthew like this, Wu Ming smiled helplessly. Then he spoke to Matthew. Of course, I'm also very gentle with you. Wu Ming raised his hand and stroked Matthew's short hair. After all, Matthew was also a little girl worthy of love, not to mention. Matthew, you have inherited the power of Galahad. Galahad and I have a special relationship. Wu Ming's words stunned Matthew. Could it be that Senior Cylinder had another identity? Matthew was puzzled. Although Matthew wasn't a particularly smart person, he wasn't stupid either. Judging from the dual identities of Jack the Ripper and Cylinder, he was definitely not an ordinary person. In that case, Galahad was related to him. Could he be a Knight of the Round Table? Then, just as Matthew's thoughts were running wild, Wu Ming spoke again. Of course, even without Galahad's power, I would still be gentle to you. He pressed Matthew's little head a little harder and pulled Matthew out of his thoughts. Then let's go. Let's fight them first. Then, Wu Ming drove the white deer again. The white deer carried Gudatsi, who was sleeping soundly in Wu Ming's arms, Wu Ming, who was full of fighting spirit,
and the confused Matthew as they moved quickly toward Boise. When they were still a short distance away from Boise, Wu-Ming deactivated the white deer state of the Holy Lance. It wasn't to show his sincerity, but because he had encountered an enemy. Then, a minute later. Slash dash. Boom dash. The last robot infantry was cut in half with one shot. With the explosion, the 100-man robot infantry unit disappeared from this singularity. Gudatzi and Matthew were stunned as they watched Wu-Ming walk out of the explosion with a comfortable expression. From the moment the three of them encountered the 100-man robot infantry unit, Wu-Ming gently woke Gudatzi up, Matthew and Gudatzi got off the deer, and the white deer turned into the Holy Lance. It took almost 30 seconds. Then, when Matthew wanted to fight these robot infantry with Wu-Ming, they saw how quickly they were dealt with as if they were vegetables. Strictly speaking, Wu-Ming needed to kill at least 3 or 4 robot infantry per second, and that was strictly according to 30 seconds. Of course, it must have been less than 30 seconds. Because in the battle just now, Wu-Ming killed more than a dozen robot infantry with one shot more than once. Let's go, it's time to meet the servant. Forget it, it's over anyway. With this in mind, Gudatzi and Matthew smiled awkwardly, then followed Wu-Ming to Boise. After walking for almost a minute or two, Gudatzi and Matthew noticed the fortress-like town in front of them, and a white-haired man holding a golden lance and wearing golden armor standing alone in front of the fortress with his eyes closed. Karna. Gudatzi and Matthew didn't know this person. After all, Gudatzi and Matthew didn't see Karna when they were in Winterwood City. At the beginning of the battle between Karna and Gilgamesh, Gudatzi naturally didn't have the chance to see it. Later, when everyone went to the Yuzong Mountain, Karna only appeared to snipe Gilgamesh, but he was quickly rescued by Marshal Gil de Rice. After that, because of Astrio's noble phantasm, Gudatzi and Matthew didn't see Karna. After that, Karna was eliminated by Gilgamesh. It had to be said that this was a really sad story. Because of this, when Gudatzi and Mashu saw the white-haired man with golden armor and golden spear, they didn't recognize him. However, this didn't prevent Wu-Ming from knowing Karna. Whether it was the Battle of the 14 Riders or the burning Winterwood City, Wu-Ming had contact with him. In the Battle of the 14 Riders, Wu-Ming defeated Karna by cheating. In Winterwood City, because of his rank, Gilgamesh replaced Wu-Ming to fight Karna and defeated him in the end. Wu-Ming wanted to laugh. He was almost the same as Zhou. He was on the opposite side of Karna, and he was always beating Karna. However, to be able to meet Karna 3 times outside the Martyr's Palace, it could be said that it was fate. He just didn't know if this Karna had Wu-Ming's memories. However, Karna of Fuyuki City has the memories of the battle between the 14 Riders and the 14 Riders, because Wu-Ming felt that Karna also has the memories of those 2 battles. Sure enough, you are also in this singularity. Karna opened his eyes and looked at Wu-Ming. Sure enough, Karna remembered Wu-Ming. I didn't expect that we would meet again. It's really fate, Karna. Wu-Ming smiled. Karna also nodded, then looked at his hand that wasn't holding the spear. Yes, the identity of a servant can really make such miracles happen. When Wu-Ming and Karna were chatting, Gudatzi was indeed shocked. Karna! The god-killing hero who was defeated by the Hero King before I even met him. Now I see him in person. After all, she didn't see his real face last time, so Gudatzi was quite regretful. Indeed, I can feel a very dangerous aura from Mr. Karna. It's like the fire of the sun that can burn everything. Matthew said solemnly as he sensed the magic power that Karna was gradually emitting. He was ready to protect his master with his shield. By the way, I feel that Karna and Assassin are close. Why don't you do us a favor and let us pass? Gudatzi looked at Karna with a smile. Is this the master of Chaldea? Although he looks trustworthy, he's still a bit immature. Karna glanced at Gudatzi expressionlessly. Then, Karna waved his golden spear at Wu-Ming. I've already accepted Edison's request and worked for him. He asked me to guard this place. Gudatzi, who felt that things were going to fall through, looked a little depressed. But if it's him, I can let him pass. It seemed that Karna had some understanding of Wu-Ming after many competitions, and it was a positive understanding. Just as Gudatzi's sadness turned into joy, Karna spoke again. But it's rare for us to meet. It's not right to let him pass without a fight. With that, Karna rushed at Wu-Ming. Then, Gudatzi's face turned green. She felt like she had been tricked.
To put it bluntly, we still have to fight, right? I'm already prepared. Wuming laughed and faced the incoming Karna. The third battle between the scorching golden spear user and the holy silver spear user had begun. Chapter 494. Clang, clang, clang. The ear-piercing sounds of metal colliding echoed in the air. Huff, huff, huff. Flames raged on the ground in front of the main gate of the fortress like meteorites falling from the sky. The walls of the fortress nearby also showed signs of damage. Hum! As if the air was vibrating, countless rays of light and flames clashed with each other. The figures of flames and meteors kept intertwining. The tip of the spear accompanied by flames and the tip of the spear accompanied by holy light could be vaguely seen. Obviously, that was where the sounds of metal colliding came from. Due to Karna's sudden attack, Wuming didn't back down and counterattacked. This battle implicated Matthew and Gudatsi for no reason. This was because as long as Gudatsi showed the attitude of negotiating with him, Karna would definitely not attack again. However, this time Wuming was involved. Although he had joked that Wuming was like Zhou to Karna, in fact, Karna did have some feelings for him. After all, even a saint would be prejudiced if he kept losing to the same person, let alone Karna. As a result, Karna and Wuming fought for the third time. Both the overflowing magic power and the airwaves caused by the battle affected a shield on the battlefield. The shield kept shaking and seemed to be in danger. Ugh! Matthew put his shield in front of him and struggled to resist, protecting Gudatsi behind him. The blade of the shield extended out from the bottom and stabbed deeply into the ground. One could vaguely see a thick layer of magic power attached to the shield. It was Matthew's magic defense skill, which had the same nature as magic release, except that magic defense was used for defense, while magic release was used for attack. However, even so, the current situation was quite bad for Matthew. Karna's sudden attack during the conversation and Wuming's counterattack were all carried out under the premise that Gudatsi and Matthew hadn't retreated to a safe range. In the beginning, Karna paid attention to Gudatsi's safety. After all, he wasn't a criminal. Wuming was the same. His love for Gudatsi naturally made Wuming pay attention to Gudatsi's safety. However, the two of them were extraordinary figures after all. Originally, they wanted to hold back, but now, it became a battle where they gradually increased their strength. Realizing that she might get hurt if she continued to watch, Matthew wanted to take Gudatsi further away. However, before Matthew could take Gudatsi out of the danger zone, the aftermath of flames, holy light, air waves, and storms swept over. It was precisely because of this that the city walls of Boise City had become so dilapidated. Now, Gudatsi could only hide behind Matthew's shield. Once she left the protection of the shield, Gudatsi would probably be blown away in an instant. At this time, Roman, who was paying attention to this place, turned on the virtual screen and projected it to Gudatsi's side. Sure enough, Sarand and Karna are both exceptional servants. The aftermath of a battle of this level can't be ignored. Roman said to himself and nodded. Doctor, you'd better not talk too much. Can't you see that Matthew is already having a hard time? Gudatsi looked at the virtual screen beside her with disgust. Yes. Just by being called out by Gudatsi, Roman had once again returned to his cowardly and timid appearance. However, Gudatsi could shout from here, which showed that Matthew was well protected. However, even if she could only be protected, Gudatsi wouldn't just stay behind Matthew. Now, Matthew's hand holding the shield was already covered by Gudatsi's hand. Feeling the warmth of Matthew's hand, although his body was very tired, Matthew's heart was incomparably firm. Although it seemed that Matthew couldn't hold on any longer, his shield could still continue to resist the aftermath of the two exceptional servants. There was nothing that the sacred round table couldn't resist. Doctor, is there no way to stop them? Gudatsi roared like a child. However, this was a last resort. Although they didn't know why Boise City had become a steel fortress, the steel fortress had collapsed under the battle between Wuming and Karna. That's right, the walls of the fortress that was in good condition just now had been broken, and a few mechanical infantry could be seen faintly falling down. Not only that, but the ground where Matthew and Gudatsi were standing also began to crack. If they waited for Wuming and Karna to fight for a while longer, there was no doubt that the two of them who had released their noble phantoms would destroy the fortress. What can I do?
Roman scratched the back of his head weakly. At this moment, Wuming and Karna separated, and the fight naturally stopped. However, this also proved that the two of them weren't too immersed in the joy of fighting. If we don't release our noble phantoms, we won't be able to determine the winner in a short period of time, Karna said lightly. After all, during the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, Wuming and Karna couldn't determine the winner in terms of martial arts, so they still had to rely on their noble phantoms. When he said that, Gudatsi, Matthew, and Roman were shocked. If he released his noble phantoms, Gudatsi and Matthew would be in trouble. Even so, you and I don't want to release our noble phantoms, right? Wuming threw the spear in his hand, and the spear turned into white light and merged into his body. That was not the real holy spear Yggdrasil, but a noble phantoms based on the identity of the Holy King. After all, the real Yggdrasil was still in Uruk. Moreover, this time, it's not pure martial arts. Your flame and my light are not simple things. Just like this. Wuming raised one of his hands, and a white light emerged. However, unlike the holy light in the past, this time, the light in Wuming's hand was full of cruel charm. Just like the church organization in fantasy novels, there were many gentle and amiable church members, but there were also church members who were responsible for judgment. At this moment, Wuming's light was in such a form. This time I won. Wuming smiled slightly at Karna. After Wuming finished speaking, Karna did not answer but fell into silence. I feel that Assassin's aura is a little different. It's a bit serious. Is it an illusion? Gudatsi approached Wuming and looked at the light in confusion. Maybe it's really like what Senpai Cylinder said, these lights are not simple things. Matthew also came over. Matthew and Gudatsi, one on the left and one on the right side of Wuming, looked at the light. At this moment, Matthew had already put down his shield, and the two had already begun to move toward Wuming. Some of the conversation between Wuming and Karna naturally fell into the ears of Gudatsi and Matthew. Indeed, the current you is somewhat different from the two you that I met before. This time, I have indeed lost. Cough, cough. After that, Karna coughed and blood came out of his mouth. Chapter 495. Although Karna was coughing up blood, his face did not change much. He was still pale because he was a Caucasian. After calmly wiping away the blood that he had coughed up, Karna put away his golden spear. However, unlike Wuming, he could not put the spear back into his body. Instead, he made the golden spear disappear into the air as if it was spiritualized. However, at this moment, Roman was a little uneasy. Are you for real? Karna was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. Roman looked at Wuming in surprise. Well, doctor, what's so strange about that? Matthew, the good student, raised his hand and asked. Karna has the golden armor given to him by the Indian sun god, Surya. It's safe to say that almost nobody can hurt him, Roman answered Matthew's question. At this moment, Karna continued Roman's words. That's right. My armor can block 90% of the damage. Even if it's a grade A+ military relic, I can still take it head-on. Hearing Karna's confession, Gudatsi, Matthew, and even Roman were shocked. It was amazing that he could take a hit from a grade A+ relic. Even Wuming, who already knew the truth, thought that Karna was cheating. Even Wuming himself did not think that Karna was as crazy as he was. After adding the Lune rune to his armor, it could only take on a grade A relic at most. The grade A+ relic that Karna mentioned must be a relic that had been doubled. Wuming would not be able to take it. However, this was under the premise that Wuming did not resist and took it head-on. For Wuming, if he really encountered a grade A+ military relic, he would just consume a lot of mana and throw it out. If one was not enough, he would throw out 2 or 3. After all, Wuming's mana was almost unlimited. He could just use it to make babies. Of course, Karna's cheating couldn't be stopped. Other than that, the armor also has the ability to automatically repair injuries, and I can also use my flames to burn away foreign objects or negative effects in my body. As he spoke, flames began to appear in Karna's body, just as he said. A few wisps of smoke rose from Karna's body and disappeared into the air. I've already eliminated the light in my body. Without the source of damage, The wounds in my body have already begun to heal. He had to admit that the clear debuff skill was really useful. In fact, even if Karna didn't burn the light with flames, Wuming would have removed it anyway. First of all, as we saw earlier, even without Wuming, Karna could have made contact on his own. Secondly, there was no need to keep the light. Hostage-type methods wouldn't work on Karna at all, even if the hostage was himself. Lastly, since we're about to form an alliance, fighting and killing isn't good, smiley face. So powerful, Gudatsi said blankly. Matthew also nodded. Seeing the two of them like this, Karna shook his head expressionlessly. Even so, he still hurt me. Of course, Karna had to be talking about Wuming. Well, it's just a little trick. It's not worth mentioning. Wuming smiled and created a ball of light in his hand. Karna's armor was bestowed by the Indian sun god, Surya. It was said that this invincible armor was made of light, so even the gods couldn't hurt Karna at all. However, Wuming's current method was light. Karna's sunlight armor was able to block countless attacks. It could even defend against light elemental attacks. In other words, as long as there was no damage, it wouldn't defend. Therefore, in the face of Wuming's light, Karna's armor was completely unaffected. In Wuming's eyes, Karna's armor was like a piece of armor with a large gap. He could deal damage just by stabbing the air. In other words, Karna was naked in front of Wuming. Cough, cough. Back to the topic. Wuming used the characteristics of light to temporarily pass through Karna's armor and into Karna's body. Then, after the light entered Karna's body, it exploded and created an extremely harsh judgment aura. It destroyed Karna's body from the inside, which was why Karna was injured. After all, Karna couldn't defend against internal damage. However, Karna shook his head. You're stronger than me. Then, Karna told him the reason. Let's not talk about the second time we met. The first time we fought I lost. Gudatsi, Matthew, and the others also understood something. Wuming had met Karna in other places and defeated him, and Karna still had the memory of being defeated. However, Wuming shook his head with a wry smile. In the beginning, Wuming was able to defeat Karna by relying on the help of suppression, his own skills, and the protection of the golden armor. The suppression allowed Wuming to obtain a powerful noble phantasm that surpassed Karna's god-killing spear. His own skill, holy fire erosion, made him a human, which allowed Wuming to deal additional damage to Karna. In the end, Karna took off his golden armor. Without that layer of absolute defense, Karna really had no defense at all. The powerful power of Wuming and Karna's ultimate noble phantasm directly shattered Karna's spirit core, and that was how Wuming won. In the burning Winterwood City, it was Gilgamesh who fought against Karna. Just Enkidu alone was enough to restrain Karna, not to mention that Gilgamesh could also use his noble phantasm. If Gilgamesh specifically picked some noble phantasm that could ignore defense, then Karna would be a piece of cake. However, Karna was indeed worthy of being called the strongest servant. He managed to damage Gilgamesh's spirit core before he left the stage. Although Gilgamesh won, because of a moment of carelessness, his spirit core was also damaged by Karna. This showed how powerful Karna was. Coupled with Karna's handsomeness and obedience, he was simply perfect as a servant. Wuming smiled helplessly. In that case, since you've already lost, can you take us to see President Wang Edison? We came here with the sincerity of an alliance. The fight was over, Karna had admitted defeat, and Gudatsi and Matthew were fine. In that case, it was time to talk about business. I was so focused on watching the two of you fight that I forgot the purpose of coming here. Ahaha, Roman said weakly. Then, he was looked at with disdain by everyone. Since you only want an alliance, then I'll naturally take you there. After Karna finished speaking, he was ready to take Wuming and the others to see the President Wang. Is everything okay here? Gudatsi said cautiously. The steel city of Sabewasi had been turned into ruins, and a large amount of steel could be vaguely seen mixed in it. Those were the remnants of the mechanized infantry. No need, there's no living person here, and this fortress is actually just for decoration. It won't be long before the mechanized infantry comes to repair it. Good lord, this place that was originally an ordinary town turned into a steel fortress. It was probably built and constructed by the mechanized infantry that Karna mentioned. It had to be said that robots were useful. They were emotionless, tireless, and calm. If the number was increased, they could even kill a third-rate servant. Of course, because the President Wang didn't have the Holy Grail, these mechanized infantry were much weaker than the other forces. However, no force was willing to deal with the UA forces, so there was no need to be too nervous. Let's go. It's a bit far from San Francisco. Let's try to get there before dark. After that, Karna jumped and left. There was no need to worry about losing him. The servant's aura was very obvious, so Wuming was not in a hurry. Then I'll turn off the screen first. After that, Roman's figure disappeared in front of them. Let's follow him. After that, Wuming pressed his hand on the ground, and a white deer appeared. It was the one he rode before. Then, Wuming, Gudatsi, and Matthew sat together again. But this time, there was no sign of Gudatsi sleeping. In this way, Wuming's plan to go west came to an end. Chapter 496. Wuming, Gudatsi, and Matthew rode the white deer and followed Karna. Although Karna ran very fast, the white deer controlled by Wuming was not slow either. Hence, Karna had no intention of slowing down, or rather, he had no intention of slowing down from the beginning. In this way, with Karna's pass, Wuming and the others could be said to have a smooth journey. Witnessing the scene of the mechanical kingdom along the way, Gudatsi and Matthew were quite surprised. Even Wuming was a little surprised. Along the way, basically every town had become a steel fortress, just like a modern town. Every city had stable residents, and there were also a small number of mechanical infantry. Other than that, there were a large number of mines in the central and western part of the Cordillera Mountains. There were a large number of mechanical infantry with all sorts of tools, such as picks, shovels, chisels, and so on. Countless minerals were being transported in the direction of San Francisco. Wuming guessed that it was likely to be the raw materials for the production of mechanical infantry. I'm afraid that these mechanical infantry were created by Edison. This was Wuming's judgment at that time. However, both Gudatsi and Matthew felt that it was right. After all, Edison was an inventor, and it was not unacceptable for him to produce these mechanical infantry through noble relics or skills. After all, they were servants, and the definition of ordinary people lost its effect. Indeed, these mechanical infantry were all created by Edison alone. Karna also nodded. However, Wuming was quite concerned about this sentence. They were created by one person, and there were so many of them. Although the strength of these mechanical infantry could not compete with the soldiers of other forces at all, and could even be said to be crushed, these mechanical infantry were equipped with special equipment. Most of these mechanical infantry were mainly armed with machine guns, and Wuming could feel the magic and threat from these machine guns. Previously, when Wuming and the others were attacked by a team of 100 mechanical infantry, those mechanical infantry used machine guns. Wuming, who took a few hits, could determine that although there was not much magic, and the threat was very small, there was no doubt that those machine guns were comparable to low-level noble relics. On the shells of those mechanical infantry, Wuming also felt the same magic, so Wuming speculated that the shells of these mechanical infantry were also comparable to low-level defensive noble relics, and could even be used to hit people. However, even so, they could not resist Wuming's spear. A low-level noble relic was a low-level noble relic. Wuming's spear was enchanted, and piercing these mechanical infantry was as easy as piercing paper. Of course, even if he didn't add magic to the weapon, it wouldn't be too difficult to stab with the spear. It would only be like piercing through cardboard. It was precisely because of this that the team of 100 mechanical infantry they encountered earlier was so easily annihilated by Wuming. However, if compared to the soldiers of the other forces, it was almost enough. After all, mechanical infantry used machine guns, and this was the only force that used firearms among the several forces. Although they could also compete in numbers, the other forces were blessed by the Holy Grail, so it was obviously unwise to compete in numbers. Of course, if Edison's production speed was enough to rival the other forces blessed by the Holy Grail, or even surpass them, it was not impossible to compete in numbers. Wuming still remembered the incident where Edison only slept for 3 to 4 hours when he was alive. On the way, he even joked, maybe this incident was sublimated into his noble relic or skill. Although it did become Edison's noble relic or skill. And it was Edison who told them personally after the success of the joint operation. We're here. San Francisco is right in front of us, the base camp of our force. Karna stopped and said to Wuming and the others behind him. Looking at the gradually darkening sky, Wuming felt that with Karna leading the way, it would indeed save them a lot of effort. Although Wuming also knew that Edison's base camp was in San Francisco, and he also knew the general location, he had not been to this place before. Compared to fumbling around on his own, it would be faster to have a familiar person leading the way. Then let's go. Get ready to form an alliance with Edison. Then, the four of them entered San Francisco together and came to a palace-like house. Although it looked like a luxurious house from the outside, the interior was not that outstanding. The structural materials were just like an ordinary house. The only difference was that the interior space was not small. This should be Edison's office or laboratory. Wuming guessed. Then, under Karna's lead, they came to a house that looked like a living room. There were ordinary wooden sofas, ordinary tables, ordinary tea sets, and ordinary plain water. It seemed that after Edison was driven here, he did not have a good time. Wuming thought. Or rather, Edison did not deliberately pay attention to these things. Then, where did his attention go? Of course it was on the mechanical infantry. After Karna entertained Wuming and the others for a while, he let Wuming and the others stay here alone. Then, Karna left, probably to find Edison. However, it was really fortunate that it was Karna. If it were someone else, even if Wuming and the others said that they wanted to negotiate, the other party would not let Wuming and the others sit here like this. No matter what, he had to find someone to look after Wuming and the others. After all, it was not completely determined whether Wuming and the others were really here to form an alliance. What if Wuming and the others had other purposes and took advantage of Karna's absence to carry it out? Only Karna, who had the skill of the poor, dared to do this. Poor's knowledge. Karna was lucky enough to ask the weak about their lives and values. He could see through the other party's character and attributes, and he would not be deceived by verbal excuses. In addition to not being deceived by falsehood, he also had the characteristic of not being deceived by false words. Karna could tell that Wuming and the others were not lying through this skill. Coupled with Karna's understanding of Wuming, he was very relieved to let these outsiders stay here alone. I can only say that as expected of Karna. Wuming drank a mouthful of plain water and said indifferently. Gudatsi and Matthew were stunned by Wuming's sudden words. Assassin, what did you just say? Why don't I understand? Gudatsi naturally would not hide her doubts in her heart and asked directly. It's nothing. I just figured out some things. It's nothing to worry about. Wuming then smiled helplessly and waved his hand, indicating that they should not worry about him. Since Wuming said so, Gudatsi and Matthew naturally did not pay any more attention to him. At this moment, the door of the room was opened, and a strong blue lion head walked in. Chapter 497. The door was pushed open, and a strange creature with the body of a human and the head of a lion walked in. The newcomer was dressed in blue tights. His muscles were bulging and he seemed to be quite powerful. He wore red gloves with silver edges and dark brown men's boots. He also had a red cape with white stripes that reached his ankles from the back of his waist to the side of his waist. There was a metal plate on his chest that looked like the mouth of an energy cannon, and there were stripes around it that looked like a hero who fought monsters. There were 2 large bulbs on his shoulders, but the most eye-catching thing was the white lion's head. Oh! Is this the master of Chaldea? It's an honor to meet you. With your help, our wishes will come true. The lion's head spoke in a lion's voice as soon as it appeared. Gudatsi and Mashu were stunned when they saw the lion's head, because the contrast was too big. Now they felt like they were watching a comedy. Wuming was also curious about the lion's head, but he was not as stunned as Gudatsi. You must be President Wang Edison. Gudatsi and Matthew widened their eyes as soon as Wuming finished speaking. They looked at Wuming as if they had gone crazy. Wuming pretended that he did not see them, and the lion's head, Edison, did not notice Gudatsi and Matthew's expressions. He was looking at Wuming. Oh, you're right. I'm the symbol of America. I'm the king of all presidents. I am Edison. Then, Edison struck a pose on his own.
Gudatzi and Matthew did not know what to do. It was too awkward. Yes, yes. President Wang, please move aside. Your body is too big. Then, an intellectual female voice was heard. Oh. Sorry. With that, Edison walked towards the interior of the room. It turned out that Edison stopped to talk to Gudatzi and the others as soon as he opened the door. Coupled with Edison, who had undergone some sort of mutation, this overly tall body completely blocked the door. Now, Edison moved aside, revealing the people behind him. Karna walked in with a petite but intellectual woman. Gudatzi and Matthew were thinking, finally, there's a normal person here. The woman began to introduce herself. Hello, I'm Helena Blavatsky. I'm Edison's friend. You can call me Helena. Helena smiled at Gudatzi and the others. It had to be said that Helena was quite approachable. Anyway, Gudatzi and Mashu had calmed down now. Hello, Madam Helena. I'm Tachika Fujimaru, and this is Matthew Gillett. Nice to meet you, Gudatzi said happily. Hello, madam, Matthew said politely to Helena. Sure enough, compared to the cold-hearted Karna and the lion-headed Edison, the gentle and intellectual Helena was more likable. Ah, what an obedient child. Helena also nodded with a smile. Ahem. Edison coughed. Of course, this meeting was not a friend meeting, but a joint negotiation. A faint smile appeared on Helena's face upon seeing this, and she took a position behind Edison. By the way, Karna, who had remained silent this entire time, was already standing behind Edison. Since when did Edison value power so much? Wu-Ming saw this clear master-slave relationship, but Wu-Ming didn't say anything. Then, Edison spoke. So, Master of Chaldea, let us begin the negotiations on the alliance. Then, Edison sat opposite Gudatzi, and Helena and Karna stood behind him like guards. The atmosphere changed instantly. In order to not lose their dignity, Matthew and Wu-Ming went behind Gudatzi together. Now Edison and Gudatzi were sitting opposite each other, Karna and Helena were facing Wu-Ming, and Matthew was standing behind Edison and Gudatzi. One had to know that a negotiation would only be a joint negotiation if they were equal in strength. If they were not, it would be annexation. However, Gudatzi was a master who had experienced the terrifying aura of the Magic King in the 4th chapter. After all, just the current atmosphere was not enough to scare Gudatzi. Gudatzi looked at Wu-Ming, and Wu-Ming smiled and nodded in encouragement. Then, Gudatzi spoke. Well, Mr. Edison, I think we have the same goal, which is to defeat the other forces and seize the Holy Grail. Therefore, I think we can work together. Seeing Gudatzi state her goal in an orderly manner without being scared by the atmosphere, Wu-Ming was extremely gratified. Of course, Gudatzi's junior, Matthew, and Roman, who had been silent and had not shown his virtual screen, were also gratified. This was what Wu-Ming had told Roman on the way. Roman's face and voice seemed to have the ability to taunt. In addition, Wu-Ming felt that Gudatzi needed to be trained, so he told Roman not to appear and hear. After thinking about it, Roman agreed. After asking Wu-Ming to take care of Gudatzi, he went into hiding. However, he could still hear everyone's conversation. There was no need to hide this, so Wu-Ming did not say anything. Edison nodded and expressed his affirmation. Well, I see. We can work together, but I'm not going to take the initiative to attack. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Although he said, I'm sorry to disappoint you, Edison's face did not show the slightest hint of apology. Why? Matthew was obviously surprised by this answer. That's right, Mr. Edison. Although there are only a few of us this time, I'm here to work with you on behalf of the servants who are alone. We have gathered Sharon, Achilles, Nightingale, Geronimo, and many other servants. I believe that we can save this era if we work together. Hearing Gudatzi's words, Edison was not surprised. Instead, he touched his chin and thought, oh, there are heroes like Achilles, Sharon, and I didn't expect Ms. Nightingale to be with you. Then, Helena opened her mouth and explained to Gudatzi. Actually, Ms. Nightingale used to be one of us. Due to the arrival of several new forces, our camp was forced to retreat to this place. Ms. Nightingale didn't retreat because of her unique personality. I thought she had already left. After a pause, Helena continued.
In fact, we also have many servants, but we lost a lot of them when we fought with the Celtic side and the 3 new forces. At present, there are only 3 of us left. We thought Ms. Nightingale had left, but we didn't expect her to still be here. Edison didn't stop Helena from exposing his family's information. After all, there was no point in lying about this. A little investigation would reveal that for someone who was at the end of their rope, hiding their trump card would be a foolish move to bring their trump card to hell. However, what Helena meant was that Edison was concerned about the fact that Nightingale was still alive. In that case, why don't we join forces to fight? It's better than being swallowed in the end. Gudazzi was a little puzzled. In the first few singularities, except for the enemy servants, basically all the servants they encountered would join their side, and then everyone would win the Holy Grail together and solve the singularities. But this time, the President Wang Edison chose to escape and avoid the war, which really made Gudazzi confused. I am preparing to accumulate strength, and when the other forces are defeated, we will take them down together, ha ha ha. As if he had come up with a perfect plan for himself, Edison laughed happily. In other words, Edison was preparing to go into a defensive mode to prepare for battle. However, it could only be said that he was worthy of being an inventor's brain, and he really didn't know anything about war. I don't know if Helena knows this or is really hiding it, but Karna must be hiding himself, so he didn't tell Edison. So, Edison, what if the other forces join forces to destroy you first? Wu Ming said directly, without even using honorifics, and told Edison what Karna didn't say. Huh. Looking at Edison, who was a little stunned by his straightforward words, the corners of Wu Ming's mouth rose slightly. He was prepared to cooperate with Gudazzi to play the role of the good cop while he played the role of the bad cop and put on a 2-man show. Chapter 498. Well. Edison obviously realized the problem after hearing Wu Ming's words. After all, isn't it best to get rid of the onlookers in a war? Wu Ming said as he glanced at Karna. However, Karna didn't move at all. He was just like a tool. Then, looking at the helpless expression on the lion's face, Wu Ming continued. Although Karna is indeed an exceptional servant, if the other forces join forces and send a few first-rate servants to stall him, then only you and Helena will be left. Do you think you can resist the attacks of 2 or even 3 forces? Wu Ming said as he walked toward Edison. Karna and Helena didn't move either. Wu Ming's words made Edison even more speechless. Karna still didn't say anything like a tool. Helena seemed to want to say something, but in the end, she still didn't say anything. This sentence pointed out the biggest weakness of Edison's group at the moment. They didn't have high-end combat power. Regardless of whether it was Helena or Edison, Wu Ming didn't think that they would be able to last more than a few rounds under his gun even if they fought with their lives on the line. At most, they would be able to last 5 rounds. It could be said that if it weren't for Karna, Wu Ming would have been able to instantly kill the 2 of them. Of course, Wu Ming didn't have such thoughts. But since that was the case, it meant that only someone could stall Karna, and if a few more powerful servants came, then Edison and Helena would be dead for sure. I've seen a lot of powerful servants from other forces. The demigod hero Hercules, the huntress Atlanta, the traitorous witch Medea, the Roman Emperor Julius Caesar, and the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra. Do you really think you can resist their combined forces? Wu Ming was getting closer and closer to Edison. But, they might not join forces. Edison's lion face looked very weak. Indeed, but don't forget, those are only the enemy servants I've identified so far. In Denver, there is also the King of Ghosts, Shitendaji, who is suspected to be the commander of thousands of ghosts. You won't believe me if I say that Shitendaji has no other servants under his command. In addition, I don't think the Greek forces only have a few servants. There must be more powerful ones behind them, and Rome, which can fight Greece so well, must have other powerful servants. Well, the reason why Greece and Rome could fight so well was that neither side had the intention to start a decisive battle. After all, there were still other forces eyeing them covetously. Wu Ming believed that if both sides were to fight to the death, the Greek side would have the upper hand. That was because the Greek side was more mysterious than the Roman side. Of course, this was only a guess at the moment. After all, they had not completely confirmed the hidden means of both sides. Wu Ming also relied on this information that Edison didn't know to be able to scare him. Then, Wu Ming continued to speak, word by word seriously. Do you think that you can resist Karna, your robots, and the fortresses that can be destroyed easily in a battle? You think that you can resist Karna, your robots, and your fortresses? Karna asked with a smile. Wu Ming said while walking, and he had already walked in front of Edison, staring at his lion face. Even so, Helena and Karna still didn't move, as if they trusted Wu Ming very much, or they really regarded themselves as tools called servants. Wu Ming's words that did not leave a way out mercilessly poked at Edison's soft spot. In fact, Edison already knew in his heart that if there was an enemy attack, with his super weak individual combat ability, other forces might not be able to resist. No, it should be him, and Helena was naturally the same. If Garna was held back, then they would definitely fail. That was why Edison wished he could spend an extra hour a day, a total of 25 hours making mechanical infantry day and night. And those towns and fortresses were built for this reason. Otherwise, he would really have no sense of security. He knew all this, but he was subconsciously unwilling to admit it. I still have the Superman potion that I have painstakingly developed. As long as I inject this into my body, I can get the power of a superclass servant. Edison said excitedly, and he took a tube of colorful potion from nowhere. Then, bang! Wu Ming grabbed the tube of Superman potion in an instant, and with a hand that seemed to be holding on to magic, he threw the tube to the ground and crushed it. Now you don't have it. Wu Ming still stared at Edison's lion face, and said this shameless sentence very calmly. But even so, in Wu Ming's vague prying, Karna and Helena still didn't move, and Helena even breathed a sigh of relief. In an instant, Wu Ming seemed to have understood something. Poor lion head. Not only was he tricked by the enemy, but he was also tricked by his own people. But this was indeed for his own good. However, at this moment, Edison had no time to care about others. Edison speechlessly looked at the Superman potion on the ground that had lost its color and was gradually drying up. That was the only tube of Superman potion left. Looking at the Superman potion that was gradually seeping into the ground and slowly disappearing, Edison really had no power at all now. By the way, I'm here on behalf of the Celtic forces to ally with you. I have already joined forces with a master of Chaldea to save this singularity. How is that possible? Edison was shocked after hearing this. You barbarians don't know how to ally. Edison seemed to have a deep grudge against the Celts, so when he knew that Wu Ming was on the Celtic side, he was extremely excited and returned to his previous state. This time, even Helena's face showed a hint of surprise. It seemed that Karna didn't tell them that Wu Ming was on the Celtic side. Wait a minute. Wu Ming remembered something. It seemed that he didn't tell Karna and Wu Ming that he was on the Celtic side. I know that you have a deep hostility against the Celts. After all, this singularity was originally a war between the Celts and the United States, so the hatred between the two sides would certainly grow. Although the servants were indeed dead, and they would only return to the Martyr's Palace when they died again, in the eyes of Edison and the others, the Celts were still quite hateful because they killed many of their servants. But the Celts didn't think that way. It was the law of the jungle. Ahem. As expected of the Celtic barbarians. But there is a saying that there are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. But compared to interests, I want to be friends with you. Edison stared blankly at Wu Ming's sincere eyes, somewhat at a loss. Mr. Edison, you may not know, but I have become partners with many servants in the first 4 singularities. I really like them. They have the courage to be heroes. At this time, Gudatsi spoke in a timely manner. Miss Jean, who lost her power, still acted with us for the sake of her country. Emperor Nero, who was betrayed by everyone, still sang loudly. Miss Drake, who was not bothered by trifles and was not bothered by the secular world. Miss Drake, who had a unique power that surpassed ordinary servants. I was really happy to be with her. Mordred, Fran, and Anderson. It was because of everyone's hard work that we finally saved the singularity. After that, Gudatsi stood up and walked in front of Edison. Hint. Wu Ming has already left Edison while Gudatsi was talking. Gudatsi held Edison's furry hand and said firmly, "Please cooperate with us, Mr. Edison." Edison looked at Matthew's smiling face, Wu Ming's hateful face, because of the Celtic forces, Helena's encouraging face for her friend, and Karna, who finally nodded. Edison nodded heavily. Oh! Chaldea's master. From today on, we are partners. Oh no! Seeing Edison posing like a Chunibu again, The people present did not feel awkward anymore. Instead, their faces were filled with joy, and the joy of having a new partner increased. Chapter 499. After officially deciding to work together to fight against the other forces, Edison roared, Oh, I'm going to implement a 26-hour-a-day work system now, and left. He probably went to continue building mechanical infantry. After all, Edison's only purpose was to build mechanical infantry. Karna, on the other hand, greeted Gudatsi, the master leader, and left San Francisco to continue guarding Boise. After all, Wuming said that Denver might be the king of ghosts, Shitendaji, so he still had to go and guard it. In the end, only Helena, who was already sitting with Gudatsi and Matthew, was left at the scene. Wuming could only smile bitterly. Should he say, as expected of women? They actually got along so well with each other so easily. Little Li Xiong, it's all thanks to you guys for coming. Helena sat beside Gudatsi, and held her hand as she spoke. Ha! Why do you say that? Gudatsi expressed that she didn't understand at all. However, Wuming was already sure of one thing. Even if Helena and Karna did set up Edison, it was out of good intentions. Therefore, Helena and Edison allowed Wuming to do whatever he wanted. The lion head is so pitiful. While Wuming was sighing, Helena told him the reason. Actually, the reason why Edison became like this is because he received blessings from the past presidents of the United States. Helena's expression became a little sad. Thinking about it, it made sense. How could a human become a lion head? Actually, Edison wasn't like that, but those were the past presidents. After receiving their blessings, not only did Edison's appearance change, even his personality changed. He was willing to do anything for the United States, and he became abnormally egoistic. However, as soon as she finished speaking, Helena became happy. It could be said that it was because of your arrival that Edison was stimulated. Now his personality has changed. Helena looked at Wuming gratefully as she spoke. After all, if it wasn't for Wuming's series of series of shocking actions, Edison might not have been able to completely change back. In that case, he could only rely on beating to make Edison return to normal. Wuming nodded, indicating that it was nothing. However, this gentleman's hooligan-like actions really gave me a fright. He. Helena couldn't stop laughing even though she said that she was scared. Wuming waved his hand nonchalantly, but Gudatsi and Matthew felt awkward. I didn't think that assassin would do something like that. Although the outcome was pretty good. Ahahaha. Gudatsi laughed out loud. Matthew, on the other hand, blushed and didn't say anything. Is this Mr. an assassin? I couldn't tell. Helena was a little surprised because of how Gudatsi addressed Wuming. After all, Wuming had the temperament of a king and the aura of light like the sun. It was really hard to tell that he was an assassin. I'm indeed not an assassin. Tachika just called me that out of habit. I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm really sorry, Madam Helena. You can just call me Celander. Wuming said as he bowed to Helena in an ancient Celtic salute. You're really a Celtic, eh? I thought you were joking just now. As a lady who had studied magic all her life, Helena naturally knew about Celander, the warrior in the Celtic myth, the long march to capture the bull. So, you're a lancer. When talking about the Celtic warrior Celander, one would definitely think of his holy spear, Yggdrasil, that was comparable to or even stronger than the magic spear Jayberg. However, Wuming shook his head in response to Helena's guess. I'm sorry. Because Maeve used the Holy Grail to distort me, I descended as a berserker this time. Berserker? Whether it was Helena, Matthew or Gudatsi, they all exclaimed in surprise. Helena was surprised that Wuming descended as a berserker, but he was full of knowledge and wisdom. She wasn't surprised that Wuming was a berserker. After all, Celtic followers basically had crazy behaviors, and they had the qualifications to become a berserker. Gudatsi and Matthew really didn't expect Wuming to be a berserker. Although Wuming didn't say anything when he was in Riverton, looking at Wuming's appearance, it didn't seem like he was related to a berserker. I thought Senior Celander was a lancer or a ruler. Matthew, who was sitting on the other side of Gudatsi, said softly. Gudatsi stared at Wuming and nodded. On one hand, she agreed with Matthew's words, and on the other hand,
She was blaming Wu Ming for hiding it from her.
After all, you didn't ask me.
Wu Ming instantly threw away the blame. Then, Gudazi's little face became angry, and she looked at Wu Ming with dissatisfaction. Wu Ming smiled bitterly, then walked behind Gudazi and stroked Gudazi's little head as if he was petting a cat. Only then did Gudazi's face regain a smile. You two are really close, Helena said with a smile as she looked at Wu Ming and Gudazi, who were like a pair of siblings. Indeed, Matthew also looked at the interaction between Wu Ming and Gudazi with slight envy. However, he didn't know whether he was envious of Wu Ming who could be so intimate with Gudazi, or envious of Gudazi who could enjoy Wu Ming's touch. Then Matthew's cheeks turned red, and he quickly shook his head as if he was trying to get rid of the impure thoughts in his heart. Are you close? I don't think so. I think it's a normal relationship. Helena smiled helplessly as she looked at Gudazi rubbing Wu Ming's hand unconsciously again. She decided not to talk about it anymore. Did you know that the Superman potion that Mr. Cylinder destroyed just now could have instantly increased Edison's strength to the level of a first-class servant? Helena said as she looked at the broken test tube on the ground that had lost all traces of the potion. However, it was just a pity. She was more than happy. However, if Edison really used it, it wouldn't take long for his spiritual base to collapse. It's not something that ordinary people can use. Even if Karna used it, the after effects would be very serious. Gudazi's and Matthew's worried faces disappeared after Helena said that. They originally thought that Wu Ming's shameless behavior had destroyed Edison's trump card. However, since it was a trump card with super strong after effects, and Edison didn't say anything about it afterward, Gudazi and Matthew didn't have to worry about it. Indeed, Edison's Superman potion has super strong after effects. However, since it's a miracle potion from Edison, the king of invention, I think it still has some effect. Wu Ming took out a colorful potion from the golden ripples. It was Edison's Superman potion. Ha! Chapter 500. What's going on? I really did see you destroy the Superman potion. Helena looked at the remains of the test tubes on the ground as she spoke. Actually, one of the reasons why Helena didn't say anything or do anything was to let Wu Ming destroy the Superman potion. After all, this thing was too dangerous for Edison. As Edison's best friend, Helena didn't want to see her old friend go astray. Then, Wu Ming smiled. Test tubes can be created easily. With that, Wu Ming stretched out his hand, and a test tube that looked exactly like the Superman potion appeared in Wu Ming's hand. There was also the rainbow-colored Superman potion in it. After I got the Superman potion from Edison, I placed it in my relic space and created a replica in an instant to pass it off as the real thing. When Wu Ming took the Superman potion, there was a magical wave in his hand. It seemed like Wu Ming was afraid that the Superman potion wouldn't be damaged by a simple fall, but in fact, it was to fool others. After all, Wu Ming's Dragoness space could be big or small. He put the Superman potion in the Dragoness space with the help of the magical wave and created an identical test tube with the Create Green item. The rainbow-colored potion in the test tube was just the rainbow-colored water created by Wu Ming. It had no effect at all. Now, Wu Ming didn't even need to recite a spell to create such a small thing. It was a piece of cake for him. After all, from Edison's point of view, this Superman potion is also incomparably important. How can I casually destroy someone else's important trump card? It was also because of this that Wu Ming took the Superman potion and destroyed it so decisively. Wu Ming's move left Helena speechless. She could only shake her head with a bitter smile. Who would have thought that the test tube in front of her could be replaced in an instant? This is fate, I guess. However, I hope that you won't return this potion to Edison. I don't want my old friend to be in danger again. Helena smiled bitterly before pleading with Wu Ming. If that's the case, then I won't return it to him. With that, Wu Ming tossed the Superman potion into the air. Golden ripples appeared and swallowed the Superman potion. Wu Ming was a collector. Even if he did not use them, he would keep them in his relic as a souvenir. Then I'll thank you in advance. A childish smile appeared on Helena's face that did not match her actual age. It's getting dark. Tachika, why don't you stay here for the night? They started their journey early in the morning and left the Rocky Mountains a few hours later. They encountered Karna and fought him. Then, Karna led them to this place.
By then, the sky had already begun to darken.
In addition, the negotiation had taken a lot of effort, so the sky had naturally darkened. Looking at the completely dark sky outside, Gudatsi naturally nodded. After eating the dinner that Wuming prepared in his relic space, Helena assigned the three of them a room. Wuming's relic space was really a utility room. There was everything, and the food ingredients would not spoil in the space. After all, there was magic power to maintain them. Therefore, using the create green item, Wuming casually created a kitchen and made a feast. Because of the aroma, Helena was attracted to eat with him. Even Helena in the 19th century was captivated by Wuming's food. Well, of course. After all, this was the food that could capture King Arthur's heart. Gudatsi was a human and naturally needed to eat. Although Mashu was a demi-servant, she still had the habit of eating. Naturally, Wuming was the same. He wouldn't stop eating just because he didn't need to eat, unless there was no need to eat. Just like when food was scarce, he would choose not to eat. However, the three of them did not see Edison during this period. It seemed that Edison was really going to implement the so-called 26-hour-a-day. Originally, Gudatsi wanted to talk to Wuming about their future actions, but Wuming refused. Wuming pushed Gudatsi into the room with the excuse of resting when it's time to rest. At the same time, this also dispelled Roman's idea of talking to Wuming. He was very bored. Although Edison and Karna had left, Helena was still there.
In order to prevent his sudden appearance from causing unnecessary hate, Roman had been listening by the side without saying a word.
The night gradually deepened. Time passed. The next morning, Wuming knocked on Gudatsi's door again and took her out. Although Gudatsi had been protesting and condemning Wuming's behavior of not letting her sleep, Gudatsi still obediently put on her clothes. Really, does Tachika usually like to sleep in? Wuming complained and asked Matthew, who was sitting beside him at the table. That Senior doesn't really sleep in. I think it's because Senior Cylinder is here that Senior can sleep in peace. In other words, because of Wuming's presence, Gudatsi subconsciously slept in every day out of trust. Now that I think about it, being with Tachika is really like taking care of a slightly naughty sister. Wuming sighed and looked at Tachika, who had finished dressing and trotted over. Wuming's eyes were full of love. She was just an ordinary little girl with master aptitude, but she shouldered the burden of saving the world. How could she not be spoiled? Hey! Gudatsi said a strange phrase, then sat on the other side of Wuming, opposite Matthew, and began to enjoy breakfast. It's a traditional Japanese breakfast. I didn't expect Assassin to know how to make it. Gudatsi was surprised. Matthew was also surprised, but because of his shyness and his senior's absence, he didn't say anything. You know, I'm not dead yet. This servant's body is just a temporary body. I still have a sister in another world. If I don't know how to cook, my sister will run away with someone else. Wuming smiled and made a little joke. However, this was unexpected news to Gudatsi and Matthew. Hey, Assassin, you actually have a sister? How old is she? What does she look like? Is she your brother? Gudatsi was like a paparazzi, began to dig out Wuming's background. Okay, let's eat first. It's getting cold. I'll tell you these things later. Although Wuming said that the food would get cold, how could the magic-enhanced food get cold? He could only use it to scare Gudatsi. Wuming said so. Gudatsi didn't ask anymore and began to enjoy the food. Edison hasn't come out of the lab yet, so he had no chance to eat this delicious breakfast, and Helena refused the breakfast on the grounds that a delicious meal is enough. After all, servants eat because of lack of magic, and Helena, as a caster, hasn't reached that point yet. Since she said so, Wuming didn't insist. Then, Gudatsi began to shout because of the breakfast. Oh, this miso soup is really delicious. Matthew, come and try this pickled vegetable. This grilled snapper is so delicious. Saving people is worth it. Wuming listened to Gudatsi's sigh and could only smile helplessly. The reason for saving people is to eat breakfast. If Roman heard what you said, he would shut himself up for a while. However, when it comes to eating, being happy is the most important thing. If she can't even eat, then it's too heavy for this little girl. On the other side, Lionhead's lab. Sniff, it seems that there's the smell of grilled fish. Is it because I'm too tired and hallucinating, M? Chapter 501. After breakfast, Wuming, Godotzi, and Matthew went on their way. It just so happened that Edison was attracted out of the laboratory by a special fragrance and happened to meet Wuming and the others who were about to leave. Then Edison and Helena saw Wuming and the others off. Before leaving, Wuming gave Edison a communication device similar to a modern mobile phone. After all, Wuming didn't ask Edison, Helena, and Karna to follow them. In that case, they must have a communication device to ensure that they could contact each other at any time. This communication device was naturally made by Wuming using Create Green item. In other words, Wuming's ability could be regarded as a caster's level skill, item creation. In fact, this communication device was made by Wuming based on a mobile phone. Its only function was to connect and call another communication device. As for the signal needed by an ordinary mobile phone, Wuming used magic to replace it. As long as it was in this singularity, the two communication devices could contact each other. It was similar to the bracelet that Roman used to contact Godotzi. After all, Wuming made it based on Godotzi and Chaldea's communication bracelet. However, Godotzi's communication bracelet had more functions than the communication device made by Wuming. Ray shift, virtual screen, establishment of material supply summoning circle, and other abilities were basically related to this communication bracelet. Although the inventor of the telephone has always been controversial, it was undeniable that Edison could indeed make a telephone. That was to say, if he wanted to, he could also fight a modern war. However, his enemy was something that modern war couldn't fight. Moreover, if he really did that, it would be as unreliable as building a hot spring hotel to serve ordinary people at the end of the world. Who would enjoy the comfort of a hot spring if they couldn't survive? As for Edison, if he had the time, he would he would definitely choose to make a few more mechanical infantry instead of choosing to build a communication device. However, he didn't have many subordinates. They were all mechanical infantry that only knew how to obey orders, so building a communication device was useless. In Wuming's opinion, it was better to install a monitor on the mechanical infantry. However, it was a bit extravagant to install a monitor on all the mechanical infantry. It was better to build a communication device. So far, Edison didn't do anything and just focused on building mechanical infantry. Therefore, Edison was quite interested in the gadgets that Wuming gave him. Be ready to attack at any time. After saying that, Wuming turned his gun into white deer and left with Godotzi and Matthew. After making the white deer a little bigger again, Wuming stood on top of the white deer's head while Godotzi and Matthew sat steadily on the white deer's back. With Wuming's stabilizing magic, there was no need to worry about Godotzi and Matthew being thrown out. Of course, the same was true for Wuming. Without the mount skill, Wuming's control over the mount had decreased by more than one level. After all, the white deer under him was transformed from his gun and could not be regarded as a complete mount. Therefore, he also needed to use magic to stabilize his body. The white deer drove away from a small plain area in the west and entered the mountainous area. The white deer jumped up and down, but it still had no effect on Wuming and the other two on the white deer. Godotzi and Matthew said a few words and then pulled Wuming down. After all, Wuming promised to tell Godotzi the story of his sister. Wuming also shook his head helplessly. Then he began to tell the story of his sister. Because of their trust and the fact that there was no need to hide anything, Wuming did not plan to hide anything. Everything he said was the truth. However, Wuming did not tell the story as a legend, but as Mayo's brother. After all, it was a continuous experience. Wuming talked for a while before he left Mayo's world and went to another parallel world. Wuming also stopped. After all, he had to let Matthew and Godotzi digest it. I feel that the man named Amiya Kiritsugu is bad. He actually wants to raise Mayu as a living tool. That Ainsworth is also not a good person. He actually wants to sacrifice a little girl to save the world. If he is really so strong, we can just think of other ways, Godotzi said unhappily. Although this is the case, from the perspective of human beings all over the world, Amiya Kiritsugu's ideal and Ainsworth's approach are both correct.
Wu-ming did not deliberately refute Gudatsi but considered it from a more rational point of view. However, although Amiya Kiritsugu's worries were groundless, Ainsworth really did have the power to save the world. Although it was also considered an opportunist to be able to trick Wu-ming, he was also quite capable. Then, just as Gudatsi was about to refute, Wu-ming continued. However, let's not talk about whether they have the power to save the world first. Just the fact that they dare to touch my sister is absolutely not allowed. Wu-ming said rather domineeringly. However, in Gudatsi's eyes, this was a siscon. I didn't expect you to have a siscon, assassin. Gudatsi snickered. Ah! This made Wu-ming feel rather helpless. It was not that he did not dare to admit it, but it was not a good word to say. At this time, Wu-ming and Gudatsi heard a series of trivial words. It's just that I didn't expect the Holy Grail war in the parallel world to be like this. The Holy Grail is a humanoid life form, and it changed from being a magician to using a class card. This voice was undoubtedly Roman's. There's no one else now. Do you have to be so sneaky? Wu-ming said to the bracelet on Gudatsi's wrist rather disdainfully. Sorry. Accompanied by Roman's apologetic voice, Roman's figure appeared along with the virtual screen. I was fascinated by your story just now and forgot to turn on the virtual screen for a moment. Although the magic consumption of the virtual screen was slightly higher, it was a little too much for Chaldea who could not obtain external funding. However, because of Wu-ming's generous funding, Chaldea would not lack magic even if the virtual screen was always turned on. Previously, when Wu-ming went to Chaldea, although he did not give Roman a magic crystal or something like that, he gave him an automatic magic production device. This device was actually a defective product of the magic supply device in Blackie's body. The magic supply device in Blackie's body was transformed into an organ like a magic circuit, but this defective product could not be loaded into the human body. Although it was called a defective product, it was no different from the one in Blackie's body except that it could not be loaded into the human body. A device was enough to supply a servant with magic power. Wu-ming did not give Roman a device, but dozens of devices, and Wu-ming also increased the power, enough for Chaldea to squander. At this time, Matthew spoke faintly. A humanoid Holy Grail. Matthew was quite concerned about Mei Yu as a humanoid Holy Grail. The humanoid Holy Grail and the androids cultivated for the servant experiment could be said to have similarities. Matthew found a resonance. And this resonance was not a good thing. As Matthew's attending physician, Roman knew very well that this was not good for Matthew. As if he also knew that he started the wrong topic, Roman naturally shut up. Gudatsi did not ask Wu-ming to continue the story, but asked the next step. Assassin, what are we going to do next? Then, Wu-ming had a smile on his face. Of course, first get rid of the bystanders. Chapter 502. The three of them heard what Wu-ming said not long ago and looked at Wu-ming awkwardly. After all, when Wu-ming said this sentence before, he was referring to the American forces. But Gudatsi and the others didn't think that Wu-ming would backhand an ally that had just formed an alliance. Of course, I'm not talking about Edison. Wu-ming shook his head with a smile. I'm talking about there. Wu-ming said as he pointed to the Rocky Mountains. You mean the Japanese Holy Grail forces? Roman said thoughtfully. Of course, now the Celtic forces in the easternmost part of the continent and the American forces in the westernmost part of the continent are on the same side. The Celtic forces have Maeve. Let's not talk about offense, but defense is more than enough. After all, in addition to Maeve who was not weak, there was also Finn, Dilmond, and the Indian servant that he had never met. However, according to Maeve, she had some relationship with Rama. Since she had some relationship with Rama, she was certainly not weak, so he didn't need to worry too much about the Celtic forces for the time being. In addition to that, there was also the location of Riverton, the base of the servants that were currently alone. Riverton is located in the Missouri River Basin. It's not that far from Denver. Currently, we're in an alliance with Edison, but there's another force in the middle. The situation isn't good, so I think we should get rid of the Japanese force that's obstructing Riverton and San Francisco's Denver. Gudatsi, Matthew, and Roman heard Wu-ming's explanation and also felt that Wu-ming was right, and they all nodded. However, in fact, Wu-ming had other reasons. If there was no accident, the one in Denver was Shitendaji. That Ghost King really wanted to see the world in chaos. Last time, even if he died, he still wanted to annoy Wuming. Although Shitendaji's poison was not so fatal to Wuming, it was not the same for other servants. Especially Gudatsi, it was Shitendaji's poison. If it eroded Gudatsi, then the last master of Chaldea would be dead. Not only that, Shitendaji's poison would continue to spread. Although he didn't know if there was an end to it, but if the entire American continent was poisoned, it would be quite a headache for Wuming. So this time, Wuming didn't dare to leave her until the end. If she caused trouble again, it would be really bad. But even if it wasn't for Shitendaji, Wuming would still choose Denver as the first force. The reason was that this force occupied the Rocky Mountains, blocking the route between Riverton and San Francisco. While Greece and Rome were still fighting each other, they would take down this Holy Grail force in one fell swoop, and then join forces with Edison in the west and Maeve in the east to attack Greece and Rome. This was Wuming's plan. Then when are we going to attack Japan? Gudatsi asked the key question. Wuming's lips curled up, as if he was deliberately waiting for this question. Then, Wuming's face was full of a bright smile. There's no time like the present. When we pass by the Rocky Mountains, we'll attack directly. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, shocked voices echoed throughout the world. Hey, hey, hey. Then among the voices that resounded through the sky, there was also a voice that sounded like a joke. Just kidding. A moment later, Boise. Wuming accelerated the speed of the white deer again, and according to the level, it had reached Class A. In this way, Wuming took Gudatsi and Matthew to Boise before noon, where they were supposed to arrive after noon. Inside the Boise fortress, in a shabby house, Karna was sitting opposite Gudatsi, as if he had just realized something. So that's how it is. Fujimaru-san wants to take down Denver City directly. Then Gudatsi, who was sitting opposite Karna, looked rather helpless. That's not what I want. Gudatsi said with lingering fear. Just now, Wuming really scared her. With only 2 servants, he wanted to take down a city with an unknown number of enemies. To be honest, Gudatsi really didn't dare. Matthew sat next to Gudatsi and smiled awkwardly. To be honest, she also didn't dare. Then, as if he didn't hear Gudatsi's words, Karna nodded knowingly. I understand. I will help you take down Denver City together. Although there was some resistance, Gudatsi and others decided to listen to Wuming and attack Denver City directly. Therefore, after hearing Karna's approval, their mood improved. Then, Gudatsi and Matthew felt a burst of joy in their hearts. Sure enough, Assassin was right. As long as we come to Karna, he will definitely help us. That's right, it was actually Wuming who proposed to come to Karna. First, it was to comfort Gudatsi and others who were frightened. Second, it was because Karna was powerful. Third, it was because the Rocky Mountains were close to Boise. Even Karna didn't want to have enemies next to him all the time. As mentioned before, the reason why Karna was stationed in Boise was to defend against the attack of Japanese forces. At this moment, the American forces could no longer withstand the attack of the enemy. Just like what Wuming said, as long as someone held Karna back, there were only 2 servants left, and they were Edison and Helena, who were caster class. In the face of the mysterious Japanese ghost clan, even if they risked their lives to destroy the Japanese forces, they would still be defeated. Therefore, Karna was personally stationed in Boise. In fact, if it weren't for the arrival of Wuming and others, Karna would have been wandering in the central plain basin of the Cordillera Mountains, checking the enemy's movements. Great, with the help of the famous hero Karna, this is really foolproof. On the left side of Gudatsi and Matthew, Roman's virtual screen appeared there. Karna, on the other hand, glanced at Roman and didn't say anything. Seeing that there was finally a servant who didn't attack him, Roman was a little touched. It seems that when Karna doesn't talk to others, it means that Karna hates you, poor Roman. Wuming, who was sitting on the right side of Gudatsi, looked at Roman's face and felt that it was better not to tell him the truth. In fact, Roman's virtual screen was there from the beginning, but Karna didn't know why he subconsciously ignored it. If the enemy is really Shitendaji, my flame can play a big role. The sun's flame could burn everything, so it was more than enough to deal with Shitendaji's poison. Wuming nodded and agreed with Karna's words. In fact, This was one of the reasons why Wu Ming looked for Karna. In that case, let's go back to Riverton first, and then I will release my noble phantasm. You pay more attention to Karna, use my noble phantasm as the signal, and we will attack Denver together. Wu Ming's intention was simple. First, they had to find Karna. Then Wu Ming and the other two would return to Riverton and gather people to attack Denver. With Wu Ming and Karna around, the poison around Denver would not be a problem. After all, other than Karna's flame, Wu Ming could also use the trinkets in his noble phantasm. No problem, as long as I sense your noble phantasm, I will definitely come, Karna said solemnly. In that case, let's not waste any more time. We'll go first. After a simple farewell, Gudatsi waved goodbye to Karna. Needless to say, Gudatsi was quite lively. Although Karna only nodded at Gudatsi's farewell, it was enough to see that Karna had a good impression of Gudatsi. I feel like I'm being hated again. As Roman complained helplessly and Gudatsi and Matthew comforted him, Wu Ming and the other two set off again. Then, Wu Ming's enemy's noble phantasm rode on his face. Tenki aim. Chapter 503. Tenki Aim. Hundreds of Japanese samurai swords rained down on White Deer, where Wu Ming and the other two were, and they launched a large-scale attack. This move reminded Wu Ming of Gilgamesh. Then, the place where the White Deer was attacked by hundreds of samurai swords exploded. Boom! The explosion was extremely violent. It seemed that the samurai swords came with the intention to kill. As far as they were concerned, the plain terrain on the plateau had become a basin. The smoke and dust caused by the explosion continued to fill the air. After the explosion, hundreds of samurai swords automatically flew back to the place where they came from, a high ground in the Rocky Mountains. Hundreds of samurai swords merged into one and fell into the hands of a fox-eared girl wearing a JK uniform. She wore the JK female high school uniform with white top and red bottom. She wore a red unlined gown, red stockings, and high leather shoes that looked like wooden clogs and leather shoes. She also wore a black hat on her pale orange hair. There were two shining scabbards on her body. One was a scabbard with silver light. The samurai sword was still in the scabbard, and the other scabbard exuded a golden light. There was no doubt that it was the scabbard of the golden samurai sword in her hand. The most conspicuous thing was the pale orange fox ears on the girl's head and the pale orange foxtail behind her, which made people think of a monster. However, she was not a monster. If Wu Ming was there, he would be able to see that she was a servant. It was very likely that she was a saber. After all, she was holding a samurai sword. Mission completed, I'm done. The fox-eared girl blinked her orange eyes, put the golden samurai sword in her hand into the scabbard, and was ready to leave. Then, she was also attacked by her enemy's noble phantasm. Mythical Yggdrasil. In an instant, a huge holy light spear burst out from the basin full of smoke that had not yet dissipated. The light spear dispelled most of the smoke. The fox-eared girl also saw the target of her mission. There was a white figure in the place that was destroyed into a basin. That was undoubtedly the person who released the light spear. The white deer's figure still disappeared. Wu Ming maintained the position of throwing the spear. The holy silver armor on his body exuded light, and the helmet that he no longer wore was once again put on. Behind Wu Ming, on a piece of land that had not been destroyed, stood Gudatsi and Matthew, who was holding a shield. There was a faint blue magical power on the shield. There was no doubt that this piece of land and Gudatsi were protected by Matthew's noble phantasm. Since Wu Ming had a defensive noble phantasm, naturally, he did not need Matthew's protection. I can't believe you found my location. Although her tone was slightly shocked, the fox-eared girl still had a smile on her face. You are indeed a servant that the Spirit King takes care of. The fox-eared girl's body did not stop moving, and she quickly dodged backward. She was not a person like Wu Ming. If she was really hit by such a military noble phantasm, she would most likely be killed. Even if she did not die, she would lose a layer of skin. Rumble! The light spear hit the fox-eared girl's position. As the fox-eared girl's location was in a mountainous area, the mountaintop was completely destroyed by Wu Ming's noble phantasm. Countless stones rolled down, forming a scene like a landslide. Just when Matthew wanted to use his noble phantasm to block her, Wu Ming, who was below Matthew, waved his hand, indicating that Matthew did not need to use his noble phantasm. He took this opportunity to stop her. At the same time, the white light spear fell from the mountaintop, and Wu Ming firmly held it in his hand. Mythical Yggdrasil, Legend of the Holy King. Releasing his noble phantasm again, Wu Ming gently threw out the spear that was emitting light in his hand. However, the noble phantasm that was thrown out this time did not turn into a huge light spear, but countless small light arrows that were arranged in a row. The principle of mythical Yggdrasil's noble phantasm was to control the light to give a huge blow to the enemy. Wu Ming's holy spear, Yggdrasil, had been left behind in Uruk. Therefore, Wu Ming's weapon in this singularity was just a simulated artifact. Therefore it did not have a fixed form, so naturally, it could be used. Then, countless arrows of light hit the countless scattered mountain rocks. As if there was a chemical reaction, the rocks melted and dissipated into the air. It was dissolved by a high-heat substance called light. It was just a stone, so it was as easy as flipping one's hand to dissolve it with a noble relic. Then, the light arrows merged and turned into a holy spear that returned to Wu Ming's hand. Wu Ming looked deeply at the mountaintop that was missing a piece and frowned secretly. It doesn't look like it was hit. The fox-eared girl should not have left yet. Although the fox-eared girl was not close to Wu Ming still saw a shadow of the enemy servant through the Lune rune. It was a fox-eared girl. Although Wu Ming was too far away, Wu Ming could not sense whether the fox-eared girl had left or not. His sixth sense told him that the person who launched the sneak attack was indeed not dead. He had to say that the opponent had a good plan. Because the distance was too far, Wu Ming could not sense the enemy servant around him. As long as there were servants, once they were close to each other, they would be able to sense each other. For Wu Ming, who had a strong mental strength, as long as the servant was not an assassin, it was basically impossible to rely on sneak attacks to get close to him. However, in this way, Wu Ming could not prepare in advance. Just like the fox-eared girl, releasing a noble phantasm from a long distance. Although the control precision of the noble phantasm would be reduced if it was too far away, it could directly hit the target through prediction and other various factors. It was like a sniper sniping the enemy from a long distance. There were many factors involved in successfully hitting the target, so ordinary people could not be snipers. From this, it could be seen that the fox-eared girl was quite intelligent. However, after Matthew defended the attack and protected Gudatsi, Wu Ming also found the enemy's position through reverse inference. Before the smoke dissipated, Wu Ming threw a noble phantasm. Wu Ming's strong vision also allowed him to see the enemy when the noble phantasm broke through the smoke. It was the fox-eared girl. Although the noble phantasm also hit the fox-eared girl's position, Wu Ming did not think that the fox-eared girl would not consider the unexpected situation of being attacked by the enemy's noble phantasm. But it doesn't matter. I have no reason to attack them. Now I have a reason. Wu Ming whispered to himself. Behind Wu Ming, Matthew quickly checked on Gudatsi's condition. "Senpai, are you okay?" Matthew was slightly excited and shouted. "I'm fine. Thanks to Matthew's protection, I'm not hurt at all." Gudatsi showed Matthew a big smile and then hugged Matthew, which made Matthew's face blush. "What's wrong? What's wrong? What happened?" Suddenly, Roman's figure appeared in front of them along with his words. A virtual screen appeared. "Ah! What's going on?" Roman seemed to be panicking. Due to the diffusion of the fox-eared girl's noble phantasm, the surrounding ground only sank by 1 or 2 meters. However, the place where Matthew and Gudatsi were standing was not hurt. As a result, Matthew and Gudatsi were standing on a 2-meter-high platform made of mud. Wu Ming was below the platform. He did not enter Matthew's protection at all. He completely resisted the attack and then released his noble phantasm to defeat the enemy. We were attacked by the Japanese forces. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.